Okay, welcome to the live stream for July 25th, 2018. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you are new here, welcome. If you are returning, welcome. So great to have you guys here. Hooray is here, Slavic Princess. Oh yes, hello. Welcome, welcome. How are you guys doing? Actually, before I get going, Deborah is here. Welcome. Before I get going, I totally spaced out that book club is tomorrow. So I started reading the book today and I'm about 30% of the way through. So I should have it finished by book club tomorrow night. I don't know if my notes will be done. They'll probably be in rough draft form. I don't know. I'll see what I can do as far as notes. If they don't go up tomorrow on the website, they'll be up Friday, Saturday at the latest. So the book we are reading, it was also a last minute switch because I think the book we ended up looking at it and it just wasn't, I need to look at it again. Anyways, we switched the book, so I apologize for that. The book we are reading, or we will be discussing, is called The Intimacy Factor by Pia Melody. And if you aren't familiar with her work, she is absolutely fantastic. She was one of the, I would say, the early voices in discussing codependency and boundaries and trauma and childhood abuse and all kinds of things. She also has a ton of videos on YouTube that are from the 80s, which is always kind of fun. So, but her work is just fantastic. And she just does such a great job at explaining things in a clear way. And I just can't recommend her enough. So I hope you guys make it to our discussion tomorrow. It'll be at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And book club, we're trying to kind of get it down to where it's not so long, but it normally runs for like probably 2 hours, realistically, because I'm a talker. But I hope you can make it. Oh my goodness, lots of people are hopping on. Cutie Pie. Welcome, Katie. Oh, how funny. Katie says, I was watching Pia's YouTube stuff today. It's good stuff. That is so funny. Yeah, it is. She just really nails this stuff. Oh, well, thank you so much, Sarah. Sarah says, I love this channel. It's the best. It's changed my life for the better, and I am so thankful. That's awesome. I'm so glad. I'm so glad to hear that. It's the power of the internet is such an amazing thing. Nora's mom, Karen, Dandelion Greens, welcome, welcome. Free from narcissistic abuse says, love Pia, old school. Yeah, she is. Kamami Popcorn says, hello from France. I put my alarm clock on. It's now 2:31 in the morning. Oh my goodness. Well, you are dedicated. We are glad that you are here in the middle of the night. Kitties are cute. Daniel Ray, welcome, welcome. Katie says, it's a good hair day for you. Yes, I straightened my hair. I have really, guys know I have really curly hair, and I live in the Midwest and it's humid here. And so you never know what your hair is going to do every day. But today the humidity hasn't been too bad. So it's actually staying, it's actually staying pretty straight. But we'll see what it looks like by the end of the night. I don't want to get, I don't want to get too excited about having non-frizzy hair because it tends to not last. But thank you. Robin says this is her first live stream, but it always listens later. Very cool. Welcome. Kelly, Eileen. Elle from New Zealand. Oh my goodness. People from just all over. So Jennifer says, Dana, I know how this is. I have curly hair and I straighten it like 80 to 90% of the time. Yes, I tell you, one of the things I just found, I was watching these like curly girl videos on YouTube because I like I kind of just want to wear my hair natural, you know? Um, it just would make my life so much easier. But it's such a, you just don't know what it's going to look like because it's really curly. And so, anyways, one of the things they had recommended was getting a satin pillowcase. And so I ordered one on Amazon. They're like $8. And that makes a huge difference. So that's been another thing I've been trying. The struggle is real. Missouri Cowboy says, yay, France and Australia and New Zealand. Welcome everyone from everywhere. This is an international awakening. Yes. It really is. It never gets old. I get so excited like how widespread the internet is. It's probably a pretty basic revelation for most of you guys, but it's seriously just the coolest thing to be able to connect with people from all over the world. And it's not just me, it's the whole community here. Like I'm always blown away by that. Like somebody will mention something in the chat and then it's just what another person needs to hear that gives them that aha moment. And it could be like New Zealand and then Egypt. Like it's just connecting people from just all over. It's just so exciting. I love it. Let's see. Here, let me scroll up. Yeah, Slavic Princess says, I am incredibly depressed today. I am still overcoming how vengeful a narcissist relative was when he prevented me from succeeding. I am grateful that I can vent somewhere. Yeah, I think there's so much power in just being heard, isn't there? Like, I think so often it's not even that we need answers, like we just need to be heard. And for somebody to just say, wow, I'm sorry that that happened to you. Like there's just so much power in that. And I think there's so many things I love about this community here and in the support groups and all of that is just people's ability to do that for each other is just really cool. But yes, I don't blame you. It can be incredibly depressing. And I think when we start looking back, when things start making sense more and more, and we start seeing their behavior more clearly, and we realize, wow, this has been kind of going on for a while. And like, I kind of excused a lot of it or glossed over it or gave them the benefit of the doubt or what have you. And you really start seeing it for what it is. It's, yeah, I think depression sounds like a reasonable, normal response to something like that. It's just amazing. It's amazing the damage that an unhealthy ego is really what it is, like what an unhealthy ego can do and what it can do to other people and how cruel and hateful people can be. It's just unreal. And Paul, hello, Sad Sky. I need to message you back. I keep meaning to. This week has been absolutely wild, but we need to touch base and work on some stuff. I have not forgotten. We were working on house stuff. Well, we've been working on house stuff pretty much this whole week, picking stuff out, and we met with the contractors again today, and it's just been nonstop. But I was thinking what I think I need to do is I think I need to get a schedule down. And then I think that's my problem is I don't have a schedule. I kind of just take things at a day at a time. And I think my life would be much smoother if I could just set aside like, okay, I write in the mornings from like 8 until noon. And then, then I have lunch from like noon to 1. And then from like 1 to, whenever I do different things. Like maybe I work on some meditation videos or I work on recording some new videos or coordinating or being in the different support groups or what have you. I need to get a schedule. I'm feeling, especially since we've been moving around so much, I just have feeling very kind of discombobulated. Let's see. Oh, I was going to set my timer. I knew I was forgetting to do something. Hold on just a second. Stacy's Rainbow, can you send me a message through YouTube? Or if you're in the support group, can you send me a message there and let me know like who you are and if your screen name is different, and let me know what's going on, and we'll work on getting to the bottom of that. Okay, let's see. Yes, Free Kevin says it's hard to set boundaries with someone who can cause great damage in your life. Yes, and there was a gal in the support group the other day who articulated this so well. And so she had said that, yes, there's kind of this this evolution of understanding this kind of behavior. And so the first wave is that we notice manipulation after the fact. And that's when it feels like a hit and run accident, or like, how did I get here? What happened? Oh my goodness, what's going on? And then we start waking up to it. And thankfully, like I said, there's so much stuff out there on the internet these days that people can start connecting the dots much quicker than they were able to in the past. Even back when I was going through all this stuff, like it was a long, slow uphill climb. Now it's speeding up. But anyways, people, you realize after the fact of, oh my goodness, this is what happened. And sometimes after the fact, it might be years or decades later. But then once that first wave of awareness passes, then it transitions into the second wave, which is you're more aware of those manipulations as they're occurring. And so then you can kind of see it at the time and you're like, huh, okay. But then the challenge with that step is it's very easy for people to slip into introspection and wonder, is it me or is it them? Am I remembering this correctly? Am I interpreting this correctly? Do I have issues with commitment or my past or with trusting people, you know, or my, like, and there's that kind of that waffling period of uncertainty. Is it me? Is it my PTSD? The kind of what's going on. And then the third wave is we see that we not only see this kind of stuff as it's happening, but now we're better prepared for it. So when these early, so if that person's been in our life for any length of time, their behavior no longer catches us off guard. And so now we know, okay, this is what they do. They're crazy making, they're manipulative. This is just what they do. And so now we can better prepare ourselves before we have to interact with them. And I thought that I just really liked the way that she said that, because I think that's really very, very accurate. It's just this level of awakening to problematic behavior. But then even then, I think every stage has its own challenges. You know, the first stage, the challenge is really connecting the dots, like, because it feels like a hit and run accident. It feels random. It feels, if we are familiar with the words like narcissist or sociopath, things start, we're like, okay, yeah, okay, this better defines what I experienced, because what I experienced was way outside the realm of something normal. But then there's all that going back and forth, like, well, what if they're not a narcissist? And what if I'm making too big of a deal out of things? Or we might be like, yeah, okay, hands down, this person is a flat out sociopath or they are a narcissist. But that kind of information gathering stage, that first phase, can take, like I was saying before, it can take years or decades if a person doesn't have access to like a larger community or the internet or a good therapist, and then they're not connecting the dots as quickly as they potentially could. Then the second phase, it's that introspection. It's, is it me? Is it them? And then that third stage of realizing what you're walking into, the challenge with that is other people, it's often very invalidating, because other people, that's when all of that well-intended bad advice comes in from other people. Oh, well, you know, she's your mother, and, or, you know, children need two parents, or, you know, it's just it's a relationship issue. It's not an individual issue. You know, what's your part in things? You need to try harder. You know, all this kind of advice that might work to a certain extent if you're dealing with two team-oriented, healthy people that are having true relationship issues, but it's very damaging advice if you're dealing with two, if you're dealing if you've got one pathological person in any situation, whether it's at work, whether it's in a group you volunteer with, whether it's, you know, your neighbor, a parent, a significant other, you name it, there is no sense of mutuality. They're domination driven, like they're trying to get their way regardless of the damage it inflicts on other people. So each stage has its own challenges, but understanding that there are stages to it. And then I think that kind of the ultimate in that third stage is in realizing that other people are only going to understand this from really from their level of understanding. And that we have to kind of get to that point where it's like, you know what, I'm not going to engage in conversations and doing the whole jade thing, the justify, arguing, defending, or explaining my boundaries as to why I'm not talking to a toxic person. Like, if other people don't get it, then they don't get it. They don't need to get it. I also don't need to sit here and try to state my case and prove my case in order for them to get it. And that's very freeing when you can get so grounded within yourself that you're like, you know, I know what's toxic for me and I know what's healthy for me. And I'm okay with the steps that I'm going to take to respond accordingly. And nobody else needs to agree with that. Like, I need to do what I need to do to protect my safety and my sanity. Nora's mom asks, what are fleas? Fleas are basically maladaptive, we'll say maladaptive behaviors that people like pick up, like a dog would pick up fleas. Maladaptive behaviors that a person picks up when they are surrounded by other dysfunctional people. And so it tends to be these kind of unhealthy coping methods, different types of behaviors. You know, a lot of people, when they get out of a toxic relationship of any kind, a friendship, a relationship, a work environment, they start noticing in themselves, like, man, what is wrong with me? Like, I am not the same person. And it's not necessarily behavior changes that you would see with like PTSD. It's behavior changes. It's not even that we're necessarily even being triggered, because I think behavior changes, I guess that would be the difference. Behavior changes within us that happen after an abusive relationship that tend to come from PTSD tend to be a lot of triggers, all kinds of triggers. Whereas fleas, it's more, we're like, man, I feel like I maybe am becoming the abuser, or this is just not who I am. And it's scary. It's scary for most people. And then they're like, oh my goodness, is narcissism contagious? What's wrong with me? Why am I acting this way? How do I get back to normal? I don't want to be this way. And oftentimes the solution to fleas, so the difference between like fleas and like a full out personality disorder, fleas are bad behaviors. Personality disorders, especially when we're talking about like narcissism and antisocial personality disorder, those are also a lot of bad behaviors, but they're pervasive and persistent. So it's a person's personality. It's more ingrained. It's how they view the world. It's been long standing. This is how they've been for a very long time. With fleas, it's more of, these are the coping mechanisms I had. And these things happen subconsciously more often than not. Like, these are the coping mechanisms that I adapted or adopted in order to kind of navigate this toxic environment that I was in. And so the good news is, once you're aware of these problematic behaviors within yourself, then you can start addressing them. And one of the biggest things that helps to kind of, I guess, deal with these fleas is to distance yourself from the toxic person. Because if we're still engaged in them, we're still kind of locking horns, trying to get our point across, trying to prove to them, we're still being agitated. They're still able to like poke and prod and kind of needle us into a reaction. It's those ways of dealing with them, those ways of coping are still going to be there, because they still need to be there, because we're still dealing with them. So the less contact you can have, the more it's going to help kind of calm you down, and kind of the less of a need there will be for a lot of these unhealthy coping mechanisms. Yeah, that's a really well said, Missouri Cowboy. He says, yes, he says, fleas are way spooky. Like, did I just do that? Oops. Yeah, I did. But I recognize it and can change. And that's the difference. So if a person, awareness is always the first step with anything, with weight loss, with drinking, with smoking, with how we spend money, how we're parenting children, how we're relating to other people, you name it. If we're like, you know what, I am doing that thing that my mom or my dad used to do, I don't like that. Like, I want to do something different. Or, maybe my drinking or my weight or my spending or what have you is a problem. I think it's time to do something different. That level of awareness is always the first step. And it's oftentimes the hardest step, because we're all so close to ourselves. It's so much easier to see stuff that's going on with other people, because we have the benefit of that emotional distance. We aren't them. It's so much more difficult for a person to see our own issues and our own behavior, because we're continually justifying it to ourselves. And so if we can get to that place to really be honest with ourselves about what's working and what's not working in our life, that's really when change can start to happen. Okay, Stacy, great. I will be on Facebook in the group tomorrow. So let me make a note to myself so I don't forget. Hold on a second. Okay. Lucy says, my mom is a total narcissist. She laughs at everything inappropriate. How do I deal with this? I think a really big first step is realizing that she always does this. So it's sort of like what we were talking about earlier in the live stream of those 3 different levels of awareness, right? It's the first level is the awareness of after the fact, of, oh my goodness, I can't believe she said that. And did she really, it's that. Second level of awareness is you're seeing it when she's doing it. And then the third level of awareness is, yeah, you know what? My mom always does this. So because she's always done this before, she's probably not going to change because she doesn't see a problem with it. So then I have to change my approach to things. And a big part of that is accepting. And when we accept somebody else's bad behavior, it doesn't mean that we're okay with it. It just means we realize that this is what is going on. And so for us to expect anything different is kind of self-imposed crazy making. So you can tell when you've gotten to that level of acceptance, when she does the things that she always does that drive you up a wall, and you're like, of course she does that. Like, that's what she normally does. And you quit being surprised by it. And so that will set you free. It's so freeing to just be like, yes, of course, mom's acting inappropriate because mom acts inappropriate. And then if she does act appropriate, then you're shocked because it's like, wow, I was not expecting that. But if you can if you can prepare yourself of like, yes, this is how things are going to go down. This is our dance. Okay, this is our dance. I go over there and I say something about how I hurt my foot, and she thinks it's hilarious that somebody bullied you or that you are in physical pain. She finds something that's funny that's not funny. And then you get your feelings hurt. And then you tell her, Mom, I can't believe this. Why do you laugh at things that hurt me? Like, what's wrong? Like, that's so not cool. That's so hurtful. And then she tells you that you're making a big deal out of nothing, right? That's the dance. That's the back and forth. And the only way to break that dance is to start learning some different moves. So when she starts doing the cha-cha, you start doing the waltz, or you just disengage completely and just say, and you kind of thinking about this stuff ahead of time of like, okay, when this starts up, well, first of all, when this starts up, if something, let's say, we'll just use this example, right? Somebody's giving you a hard time at work. She finds that hilarious. It's not hilarious. It's really hurtful because it's not cool to be bullied, right? So knowing what you know about it now, that she laughs at things that cause you pain, you can realize, okay, my mother is emotionally unsafe in this way. So I'm not going to share these things with her because she's proven to me time and time again that she's going to take this and I'm not going to get the response that I'm looking for. I'm looking for my mother to be warm and comforting and validating. And that's not what I'm going to get from her. I'm going to get the exact opposite. And so a part of that too is letting the fantasy die of, I wish I had a mom who was warm and validating and compassionate, and that's not what I have. And so if I'm going to keep contact with her, I'm going to talk about different topics that aren't putting myself into a place where I'm so emotionally vulnerable, because I realize for whatever reason, she just doesn't get it. And I keep getting my feelings hurt and she keeps not understanding that there's a problem, if that makes sense. Jennifer says a parent laughing at you for calling out their bad behavior is the worst. Yeah, it's really invalidating. This book, for those of you that are just hopping on, we're doing the book club tomorrow night. So I forgot to mention it last month. We're reading the book, we're reading and discussing the book, The Intimacy Factor by Pia Mellody. And in that book, she talks a lot about different types of boundaries and different ways that they're formed and different ways that they kind of become really skewed. It's a really great read. So a lot of what we're talking about right now, we're going to be talking about tomorrow in more depth. So I hope you guys can make it. And again, if you haven't checked out her YouTube channel, she's got a bunch of videos. Pia Mellody is her name. She's fantastic. Okay, let me scroll up here. That's a tough one. Abuse Free says, hi, Dana. Please speak about how to deal with a social narcissistic environment. Like if you are in an environment where it is the dominant way of living in society or the area that you are living in. Yeah, that's a challenge because some of this stuff, it really can be cultural and it can definitely be more like societal. And I always kind of wonder when people start waking up to this stuff and they are, not only do they have this kind of stuff in their family, they have it in their whole culture where it's just this attitude of like, you know, like very limited rights, or maybe certain groups don't have rights at all, or that that it's okay to be abusive to certain genders or sexual orientations or certain people, socioeconomic status or what have you. I mean, it's hard because then you're swimming against the tide and that kind of a thing. If in those kinds of situations, I know this isn't always doable and it's not easy and it's not convenient, but I would encourage people to consider moving. And I know that sounds harsh because it's like, wow, then you're totally starting over and you don't have a support system and everything else. But I think at a minimum, moving in the direction of finding your people, finding what's nourishing for you, people that are supportive, people that understand you, and moving towards people that nourish and support you and that understand that dignity and respect are just fundamental human rights. And that can be hard because that's, that is definitely more, I think, it's not in every culture. And it is a challenge on what to do at that point. I would be curious to hear from other people, anybody that's listening to this or that's in the chat right now, if this is something that you've experienced, what advice do you have? And are you dealing with this? And if so, how have you been able to find peace in your life and kind of have you moved, or are you trying to make the situation more palatable, or what are you doing? Oh, that's tough. Hazel says, I emotionally disengaged from my narcissistic husband last year. His father had a heart attack the other day, and now my husband is trying to hug me. It's really weird. How do I respond? I guess I would ask you, how would you feel? What do you feel is an appropriate response to that? I don't think there is any right or wrong answer necessarily. It's more of like what feels, and I think too, to kind of realize if he's got this long-standing pattern of, narcissism and problematic behavior to the point where you've just disengaged from him. So even if he's needing support and comfort right now, to realize there's a very solid chance it's going to be fleeting, and then things are going to go back to the way that they were. So if you do decide to try to give him some emotional support, if you give that, I would just do it from a place that you're not endangering yourself emotionally, and that you have no expectation of him changing, him turning a corner, him finally appreciating you, any of that. It's because there's a very solid chance that that's not going to happen. So supporting him or interacting with him in whatever way that you feel comfortable is, I would say, the answer to that. Okay, let me scroll up here. It's another tough one. Angela says, speaking of mothers, Mayan sent me a text saying that she is coming into town this weekend. I don't want to see her. It is not healthy. She wants to see my son, though. I guess one of the questions I would have with that would be, is what is the relationship between her and your son? Is she appropriate with him? Is she, I guess my bigger concern would be if she's making kind of snarky, passive aggressive, or even aggressive comments about you, saying things like, oh, well, I would see you more, little Johnny, I would see you more often, but your mother won't let me. Is she saying stuff like that? Is she kind of undermining you? Is she potentially turning your son against you? Like, is she stirring the pot? If there's any, it really kind of boils down to, if other people are dangerous or destructive to you and your children, you'd be wise to take a few steps back and to limit the damage that they can do. So if it's that kind of stuff, then you don't need to do anything that is going to put you, either, you or him, in harm's way. So I don't know. I hope you kind of elaborate a little more on that. But that is tricky. That is a tricky situation. Jennifer says, Dana, how long did it take to get to where you are with your CPTSD? Is it still there? Will this ever be fully healed? It's still there. The way that I would say the most problematic ways that it manifests would be, well, I would say lately, the ways that I've noticed is if people knock on the door, if people catch me off guard. So that just sends me over the edge really quickly. So for example, we're in this apartment, we had somebody knock on the door, bang on the door today, in my opinion, fairly aggressively. And Travis answered the door and they wanted to see if they had any mail. And my heart was in my throat and I was half tempted to go climb under the bed. Like, it's that kind of stuff just sends me into orbit. So it's interesting. If you guys are not familiar with the concept of CPTSD, what can be so confusing about this is, let me back up and just explain a little bit for new people that are here. So there's PTSD and then there's CPTSD. So PTSD is more, and to add to this, if you were to go to a therapist, like what is in the DSM is only PTSD. You're not going to find CPTSD in there. Okay. So I guess just start with that. But post-traumatic stress disorder, when people think of PTSD, they tend to think of cause and effect. A person's at war, they come back from war, any loud sound, and they fall onto the ground, or they're having flashbacks. People tend to think that it has to be a really traumatic incident in order to cause PTSD, and that's not the case at all. It can be a person being in any type of traumatic situation, like a car accident. They can develop a disease. A person around them can develop a disease. Anything that's incredibly traumatic to them can have, the brain just processes trauma in all different kinds of ways. And so it can cause that, where, you know, a person's in a car accident and then all of a sudden they're terrified to drive again, or they're terrified to get on the highway, or it could even be a little bit more seemingly illogical than that. Maybe they're terrified of SUVs. It's just the way that our brain links things up. CPTSD tends to happen over like a more of like a prolonged period of time from less specific events. So whereas PTSD, bomb goes off, war veteran has a hard time listening to fireworks, for example. Okay. CPTSD, when a person's been bullied, you know, emotional, psychological abuse, physical abuse, abuse of any kind, then they can have their fight or flight kicks in. And so they're having many of the same symptoms: hypervigilance, you know, difficulty trusting, high anxiety, paranoia. They're feeling very guarded. They want to isolate, you know, trouble sleeping, trouble eating, all kinds of stuff like this. They can feel very dysregulated. And that, you know, again, that's very common. Where it can be confusing for a person who's experiencing this is that it's not a direct cause and effect. So it might be something that seems more kind of nebulous, like, well, like my example, a person knocking on the door. It's that sudden, like being caught off guard like that. I didn't have any experience where a person knocked on the door where that was in itself a problematic event. It's just, it was, and it's not always just a person knocking on the door. It was, they were knocking aggressively. So it was that sense of, you know, impending danger. And so yeah, that still really rattles me. Or if, you know, little things like that are still there. It has definitely calmed down over time. Some of the therapies, I've never tried either one of these. I didn't know about them until probably about a year or two ago, but I know a lot of people have reported success with both EMDR therapy, eye movement desensitization. I forget, EMDR, repatterning maybe therapy, and then EFT, emotional freedom technique therapy, which is like the tapping therapy, tends to help with PTSD. So that, and there's videos on both of those on YouTube as well. So if you want to learn more about that, you can check those out. But at the same time, I guess I look at it as, so we've talked about this before. So people that are new here, as far as healing goes, I think one of the biggest barriers to healing is that people tend to think that healing means going back to the way you were. And if we think that way, then we're always going to feel broken because we're never going to go back to the way we were. But the thing with that is that life is always about growth. Life is always about moving forward. So we can never, ever go back to the way we were for any situation, because we're learning new things, we're becoming different people, we're always involved in this process of growth. So I encourage people to have, I think, more of like a new and empowered understanding as far as like what healing is. Because if you can do that, then I think in part you're not going to feel so broken. And it's more about, healing is more about creating a new and empowering future for yourself. It's creating a new and empowered sense of normal. So yes, there are still things that I have in my life that I wish were not there. They're not debilitating necessarily. I mean, it's really unsettling, but I feel like there's been so many, I don't know, I guess maybe some ways I feel like it's almost like the price of all of the lessons that I've had to kind of learn. I feel like I'm just so much more awake to stuff now that, yeah, there's residual stuff there. And maybe I should go try EMDR. You know what? Maybe I should. And then I should report back. EMDR, EFT therapy on the stuff that's still there. I guess I never addressed it because it's not, and it doesn't happen that often. And it's, but I guess it is pretty bad if you want to go crawl under the bed. So, yeah. But if you're struggling with the CPTSD, here's the thing too, with a lot of the CPTSD stuff, people will often tend to think like, Dana, there's something really wrong with me. I feel profoundly broken. I want to isolate. I don't trust people. I'm hypervigilant. I'm anxious. I'm all these things. And this is still a really big problem. And I don't want to feel this way. And oftentimes what it is it's a big part of them waking up and starting to understand that the map we had of the world before this happened was incomplete. And that's terrifying. And it's terrifying to your brain too, because your brain, its primary number one job is to keep you safe. And so the realization of, oh my goodness, like there's been some major things that I wasn't scanning the environment for, it's going to go on overdrive to try to figure out, okay, what am I missing? What connections do I need to make? What's really going on here? All of that. So if you can start making the accurate connections between cause and effect, of that it's the behavior that caused you pain. It wasn't that you were in a relationship. It wasn't that this person had red hair or that they were a Scorpio or, a bartender or they liked country music or drove a pickup truck. Like it was none of those things. Like what caused you pain was their behavior. And that goes back to that whole, what we're saying, that the three kind of levels of awareness. That first level of awareness, when we go through these things and it feels like a hit and run, we oftentimes, your brain is doing this stuff, whether or not you're aware of it or not. It's linking up cause and effect. And so it's very common because our brain's like, I don't know what just happened. This is way outside the realm of anything I've ever experienced before. It's terrifying. And so it kind of benches us, and it does that to keep us safe. And so we view it as, oh my goodness, I feel isolate. I want to isolate. I'm terrified to date again. Our brain is doing that because it's sort of like, you need to go sit down for a little bit because I don't know how to keep you safe yet. And when we can start linking up correct cause and effect and realizing, oh my goodness, okay, this is what manipulation looks like. This is what abuse looks like. There's that sense of validation of, okay, I knew it. I knew there was something off, and things start making more sense. The more you're better able to keep yourself safe. And a big part of it, understanding abuse, understanding manipulation, understanding your deal breakers, understanding your boundaries, these kinds of things. Trusting, when you can shift it to where you're trusting yourself enough to walk away from anything that's concerning or problematic, then there's going to be less reliance on other people to be safe. Like they're going to be who they're going to be, but then you're going to respond. You're going to not only respond accordingly, but you're going to take a lot of like proactive measures. So I hope that makes sense. Jennifer says, my therapist is EMDR licensed, but she told me it wouldn't be wise for her to do it on me because she's been my therapist for 5 years and would be too biased. Huh, that's interesting. Well, then maybe finding a different therapist that's EMDR licensed. What I have found, what I've heard, you know what? I think I'm going to go do that. I'm going to sign up for an EMDR session so I can report back and tell you guys what it's like and kind of all of that. So um, I would find another therapist who's willing to do a session with you. The therapists that I know that do EMDR, one of the reasons they do like it so much is because you don't need to do a whole trauma history on a person. That you can go in and it's very much about the patient or the client kind of guiding it and kind of different grounding statements, and they're more in control of the process. I will sign up for it and I will report back. And if you end up going to a session, I would be really curious to know what you think about it. Or if anybody here has gone to an EMDR session or EFT, what did you think about it? And did it help? And did it not? Was it what you expected? Inquiring minds would like to know. Abuse Free says, hi Dana, do you know any good resources to learn about DBT skills? I am taking therapy, but I would also like to read on some DBT skills. You know, nothing jumps to mind, but I know that there are quite a few books on Amazon. So DBT, for those that are not familiar with it stands for dialectical behavioral therapy. It's a mindfulness-based approach to kind of behavior, behavior modification, basically getting in tune with yourself. It works really well for I'm a big fan of, I think it should be taught. I think it should be taught it's starting in kindergarten, because a lot of the skills are just really valuable, getting grounded in yourself and kind of there's so much to it. But I don't know if we have a book club book for next month. Let me do some digging on Amazon and we'll make the next book club book. What is next month? August? We'll make next month's book club book a DBT book and we'll go through it. And I would be really curious. I know that there's some people here in the chat, I don't know if they're on tonight, but that have gone through DBT. And I would be really curious to have them kind of weigh in on like what resources they found helpful, and hopefully they'll be there for the book club discussion as well. So. Okay. Oh, that's a good point. Victoria says, I'm scared to do EMDR because I get migraines and it might trigger one. Yeah, I could totally see your concern with something like that. I would be curious to know, you can't be the only person that has that concern. I would be curious to know what other people, I'll have to Google that. I'm going to look into that because I would imagine one of the things, the statements, kind of like the grounding statements in, is it EFT? I think it's EFT. That has helped me tremendously, even without all of the tapping. Actually, let me make a note to myself. I'm going to look for tap-free EFT or EMDR due to migraines. Let me chew on that for a little bit and see what I can come up with. One of the grounding statements that I found really helpful was So like you say, you're addressing kind of what the issue is, right? So um, like this low self-esteem or this CPTSD, and you're kind of repeating this, like you're just acknowledging, and then the reason that you're doing that is you're acknowledging it, like that it's here. So like even though I have the CPTSD, and then you're kind of moving your way around, you're tapping these different meridians, even though I have the CPTSD, then the final grounding statement is I still love and accept myself unconditionally, or I still love and accept myself completely. And I don't know if you guys have gone through that, or even what you might feel with me just saying that statement. But if you're anything like me, I felt like a brick in my throat because I felt like that was not true at all. Like I did not feel that way. And so that was very interesting of like, huh, okay, that's something to really work on. And that kind of led me down its own rabbit hole of like, am I waiting until I get to a certain level of healed or a certain weight or a certain, you know, some point down the road? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, am I waiting to love myself? Like that was just, that kind of opened this door to some very interesting like conversations with myself of like, why do I feel this way? And just the realization of it's okay to love yourself where you're at, that we don't need to have everything all figured out and healed and solved. And that doesn't mean that even if we love ourselves completely right where we are right now, it doesn't mean that we don't want to change anything. You know, we still might want to get sober or lose weight or do whatever it is that we're trying to do, get more organized or save more money or what have you. But it helps if we can love ourselves in the process, and then just really just like loving, just acknowledging like, yeah, I love myself, you know, like I have value and I matter and I'm worthy of taking care of myself. And that's such a huge realization. It's amazing just how powerful that statement is and how much anxiety and fear and insecurity it can just kind of knock out within you. Because yeah, um, there's so much right about you, and you're valuable because you're here and you're a person and you're a living creature, not even a person, you're a living creature. You know, you matter. Okay, taking notes. Okay, let me scroll down here. Oh, that's interesting. Grace is saying that she uses tapping to get out of an emotional flashback sometimes. Okay, Shannon was saying that she did EMDR at a time in her life when she was getting a lot of migraines, and that it didn't cause any migraines that she recalls. I would be curious too. You know, everybody processes different, emotions differently. And um, I'd be curious to know, Victoria, if your migraines, if you've noticed that there's some sort of cause and effect, like is that your body's kind of default response to stressful situations, or do you have them more if you're dehydrated, or do you have them more if you don't get enough sleep, or have you been able to identify any type of like cause and effect? Okay, let's see. Um, yeah, you're welcome, abuse free. She says, thank you. He or she, not sure which, says, thank you for addressing the question on DBT. Wow, thank you for trying to do a book read on DBT. It's so supporting. You are so welcome. I think it'll be so fun because it's such a wonderful skill set. And I don't know why I didn't think to do that before. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I think it'll make for a great discussion with everybody here. Okay. Hazel says, Dana, why do they constantly contradict themselves? What my husband says is completely illogical, but he genuinely thinks he's right. Oh, I know. It's wild to see. That's just part of that narcissism. And it's the result of an unhealthy ego is what it is. Like, they cannot be wrong. I think in their mind, to be wrong is so incredibly emotionally unsafe that they just can't even handle it. It's just, makes them too vulnerable. Whereas like with people with a healthier ego, we realize like being wrong is a part of life, right? Like, you make mistakes, you fix them, you drive on. And with narcissists, I think that's too one of the things, like, you see, there's no real growth, there's no forward momentum with them. It's because they really lack that ability for introspection, and they lack that ability to admit they're wrong, and to and then they rewrite reality on the fly. Like, that's what's so wild about things, is like, if most of us, we adjust to reality. Narcissists adjust reality to fit them. That's what makes them so unpredictable and potentially dangerous, because in their mind, it's this very childlike mindset, of understanding other people, of understanding everything. They're very kind of their behavior is really based on their whims. It's based on, just this unhealthy ego. I can totally understand where you're coming from. I briefly dated a guy, this was years ago, who really, and I was so drawn to him at first because he was so intelligent, and he was really into philosophy and logic and critical thinking. And I shouldn't even say we really dated. It was more of like, we were, I don't know, talking a lot. How about that? It was kind of going in that direction. And it was so weird because I'm like, this guy has like these major jumps in logic. And I thought for sure that he would be able to see this. And if I were to point this out in like a compassionate, non-confrontational kind of way, he'd at least be open to a discussion about things. And no, he had some of the most wild beliefs. And then it was so sad, because I'm like, wow, this guy is so awesome in so many ways. And then that narcissism started really showing up, and it was just really really wild to see. Like, he could not handle anybody challenging him, disagreeing with him, questioning him. He would that was when behavior changed, silent treatment, or he'd start raging, or I would see like this like little boy almost, who needed reassurance. It was just very bizarre and sad. So, okay, let me. Okay. Let me scroll up here. Oh, Victoria says, yeah, any therapy makes me exhausted. Oh my goodness. She says, I finally got on disability because of chronic migraines. I would be curious to know if EMDR or any therapy in general would help with that, or if it would actually make that worse. And if it does make it worse, if it's worse, if the gain would be worth the pain in the long term. Stella says, can abuse victims become narcissists? I think a lot of the theories on narcissism is that, and I forget which book it was in, it might have been in that Pete Walker book on CPTSD, From Surviving to Thriving, which is another fantastic book, where he talks about we all have different defense mechanisms, like fight, flight, freeze, and then basically like friend, like befriending somebody. And so these are kind of all of our different coping methods are revolve around these different defense mechanisms. And so there's kind of this nature and nurture component to these things. So I think different people we'd have kind of our default. So for example, if a person's in, for example, for me, if I'm in a really stressful situation, my default tends to be freeze. And I don't like, and I'll touch on this here in a little bit, because Lucy had a great comment that I had forgotten about, that it was an example she had in my book, The Out of the Fog, which I loved. I thought she just totally nailed it. I'll come back to that in a second here, but that better illustrates what I'm talking about. But so if people go into that fight defense, then they put up walls and they don't attach to people. They kind of learn that attaching people, risking themselves emotionally is unsafe. So you can, let's say, for example, you have 2 children that grow up in an abusive home, okay? And you have one child, and sometimes these things are just kind of a crapshoot. You have one child who goes on to become more people-pleasing, kind of more on like the overgiving or like codependent side of the spectrum as they get older. Honestly, like most of this stuff, we really start to see it surface when a person enters into adulthood and they start dating. That's when you can really see kind of where a person's issues are, or unresolved wounds, I guess you could say. But then let's say so you've got one child who becomes very people-pleasing, very complacent, very kind of, I need to go along with other people in order to get along. They might struggle with having a sense of self. And again, this book, Pia Melody's book, The Intimacy Factor, talks about this. So we'll go into this in more depth tomorrow as well. But the other child, their default might be more of that fight response. And so they very quickly learn like attaching to people isn't safe. And so they just they're just these walls built up. And so they might, if it's to more of an extreme, they might go through life where they just don't attach to people and they just don't care. They're like, I sleep around, superficial relationships, a pattern of unstable relationships. They don't know how to bond. They don't want to bond to other people. They don't care. They kind of consider themselves to be a lone wolf. Or those that are more like on the sociopathic end, they just use people. They use them and they exploit them. There is no emotional connection. There's no emotional depth there. And if you've ever seen somebody like this it's interesting. Like if you've ever seen somebody like this at like a funeral or something that you would think would provoke an emotional reaction, there really isn't one. They might give you what they think that they should give you. And that's really weird. That was one of the earlier signs I had with the second sociopath in my life, is he had a death in his family. And it was a death that a normal person wouldn't have been really torn up over. It was a person he didn't like. He wasn't close to them. A normal person might have gone to the funeral. They might have been like, wow, that's really sad. They might have had compassion and empathy for the parent of that person. But he put on this whole performance and like fell apart and had to come home from work and was like sobbing, and it was so over the top and so inappropriate based on his relationship with that person. It was very manufactured. And I remember at the time thinking like, this is really this is very strange that you would have this response. I could see a person having that kind of response if it was somebody that they were emotionally invested in, I guess is what it is. So, but I guess, okay, so the point being, yeah, so different people have different kind of ways of responding. And so then one of the thoughts is, this is how personality disorders really tend to form. So that there's some sort of trauma that kind of kicks off these different events. And then this is all happening subconsciously. And so maybe this one person just doesn't really effectively connect to other people for whatever reason, or they start getting their needs met in a wide variety of like maladaptive kind of ways. They become the constant, contrarian. They're constantly arguing, stirring the pot, triangulating, just exhausting behavior. And all of this is on a spectrum, right? I mean, it's all probably, if the spectrum is problematic, it's still problematic, okay? And then it could be where they're just really lashing out. There's some sort, really, it's just kind of this malformation of their core sense of self. Doesn't happen for whatever reason at a fairly young age. And one of the reasons it takes a while in order to get like an accurate diagnosis is because we grow, and children by nature, by design, are designed to be selfish. So you'll see like the little narcissist in your 4-year-old, and you'll see it again in your 16-year-old. And that's very much kind of a part of it. There's just this level of self-absorption in them. So it can be hard to kind of tell, like, what am I seeing here? But when they get older, you age out of that, and we become more team-oriented. There's that sense of mutuality. We understand emotional regulation and emotional control, and kind of what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. This is why when I talk about, if you find yourself explaining the basics of adult behavior to another adult, especially as it pertains to like, behavior, like we don't bite, we don't yell. If you're having to talk to an adult like you would a 2-year-old, it's not nice to bite, it's not nice to hit or scream. We don't call names, we don't steal things, we don't hide things, we don't lie, we don't do these things. Like, that's not nice. When you're talking kind of character things, or like ways of handling frustration, biting, kicking, screaming, things like that, people should have that mastered by like the age of 5 or 6. And so if you're dealing with these kinds of behaviors in an adult, there's like a large chunk in their emotional development that they haven't mastered those levels yet. And there's a very solid chance that they never will, because now in many ways they have that adult ability. Well, children have it too, but they have it more refined, where they can justify their behavior to themselves. And they can become very violent and feel totally justified in what they're doing. So, yeah. That's interesting, Jennifer. Yeah, that makes total sense to me. She says, I was thinking about how a knock at the door can set off CPTSD. Is there an opposite to this as well? For instance, not being set off by a big bang. Sometimes I get teased for not jumping when something crashes on the floor or a firework goes off. And yet a simple knock at the door will mess with me. Yeah, I would think that just kind of that emotional dysregulation, just kind of strange emotional or disproportionate, should say, emotional responses to different things. I would imagine kind of being numb and unaffected would be a part of that. Our brain is a fascinating thing, isn't it? Yes, New Chris says, another irony is that as codependents, our inner narcissists were shut down by unhealthy parents, so we don't look after our own needs. Yeah, if you're here tomorrow, New Chris, we're discussing this book, The Intimacy Factor by Pia Mellody. She talks a lot about that and the different ways, kind of the damage can happen to a child and different ways that that damage might manifest itself. And so one of the ways that she was talking about is if you have a parent who is abusive or neglectful, and if a child learns, okay, wanting or needing anything is bad, and they just flip that switch where they're like, it's not safe to want or need, therefore I don't want or need anything. And then we become kind of this nebulous, unopinionated, jellyfish in the jar kind of a person, where it's like we just take the shape of our environment, that we don't want or need anything because that can make us vulnerable. And it was interesting. And again, we'll talk more about this tomorrow. It was interesting when I was reading that part in the book. I found it within myself. I was very drawn to Buddhism, probably 10, 15 years ago as a philosophy, and kind of detachment from different things. And, just kind of, I don't know. Yeah, I guess general detachment. And it was interesting because I think that in me, because there's definitely, that's a big part of my personality. If I don't want anything, I don't need anything, I'll be fine. I'm always fine. Right? No matter how not fine I am, I'm always fine. And how that was able to hide itself behind Buddhism for so long for me. And that's what's so scary about some of this stuff, is because it can hide behind things that we think are really good. And, oh, this is so great, I'm just really detaching from things. I just don't have an emotional investment in stuff. And this is so wonderful. And then realizing, oh my goodness, I think a big part of that was because it wasn't safe to want, because pretty much whatever I've wanted, I haven't been able to get. So I don't know. Interesting when you start thinking about all the different ways that this stuff kind of comes out in your life, and stones that you didn't even realize you needed to turn over, like you start turning over. Oh, but let me tell you about Lucy's example. So she was talking about our different responses to things. And the chapter in the book on the Out of the Fog book was about the reacting versus responding. And so reacting is more of that level 2 level of awareness, where we're seeing, or maybe like level 1, level 2, where we're seeing problematic behavior either when it's happening, but we're not quite able to identify it. We just know that it's some BS, right? And so we're reactive. And we're like, I can't believe that they would do this. And then we're locking horns, we're getting engaged with them. We're trying to get them to see, you're being illogical, you're being difficult, you're lying to me. Like, we're fighting this, ridiculous battle with this ridiculous person. And so anyways, versus responding, which is more of that level 3 response of, yes, this is what they do. They like to provoke and agitate and then needle me into where I have a reaction, and then I explode, and then they sit back and then they play dumb, or they just, or they spin it around on me and they're like, well, see, you're too emotional. You're the problem. You need therapy, kind of a thing. Anyway, so Lucy was saying when she was dealing with that kind of stuff, when there was all of this talk in the community about, okay, we need to shift from reacting to responding, to having more of a prepared response to something. She's like, I can't do that. She's like, I can't. She's like, I've tried, and I kept feeling like a failure when I couldn't do that, because her fight or flight response would kick in, and she would basically freeze, but she would want to just get out of there. She couldn't talk. She couldn't say anything articulate. She said it was like her brain would just seize up, and she was not able to respond in a way that was effective. And so she was like, now that she knows that about herself, she's like, I have to just go no contact with those kinds of people, because it knocks her so off balance that she just completely freezes. I thought that was incredibly insightful and very accurate. It's very easy for us to talk about, oh yes, responding, right? Like we can prepare ourselves. And yes, it does help to have these conversations ahead of time and to realize, yes, my mom or my dad or my ex does certain things. And so I'm going to kind of change up the game plan and this, that, and the other. But if you're finding yourself continually knocked off balance, then it's also a sign to do something different. And that something different might mean moving more and more towards no contact. So it's good to know these things about ourselves. Okay. Stainless says, yeah, I can't gray rock. My response is to fight. Yeah, it's hard. It's really difficult to unlock horns with someone. I think if you can realize that going gray rock is a really great fighting strategy, then sometimes that can help. Because if somebody's looking for a fight and they keep needling you, they keep provoking you, they keep baiting you, and you're not responding, and you're staying and you're able to get out of harm's way, it makes them nuts. And I know it's not very mature of me, but it's very rewarding. It's very rewarding to not be reactive when somebody's trying to get you to react. So, yeah, it is its own kind of strategy. Okay, let's see. Yes, Missouri Cowboy says, I was a trained puppet. I simply reacted to the programming. I'm so thankful that I can now respond. Dream says, I love gray rocking them. Their reaction cracks me up. Man, I tell you, if you can handle it, and it's hard because they will knock you off balance in all kinds of ways that you don't see coming. But if you can realize that this is all some sick little game that their damaged little ego needs to play in order to feel good about themselves, it's not personal, like, and totally detaching. And I don't encourage anybody to stay contact with somebody that's toxic at all. But if you are going gray rock with somebody, like, you have to have them in your life when you're going gray rock, and you can really just observe this kind of stuff. It's really wild. It's really wild. You just start to see them kind of unravel and switch. It's like that scene from Terminator 2, where the bad Terminator is pushed into that pot of lava and he's trying to get out, and he keeps shape shifting into all of these things. Like, he's Sarah Connor, and then he's Arnold, and then he's the cop, and then he's John Connor's foster mom, and he's all of these different people as an attempt to survive. And that's kind of what you'll see a narcissist do. Like, when they're not getting their unhealthy ego fed, they just go bananas, and they just start throwing out everything possible. I mean, I've seen it where, like, and I think real quick too, a good baseline is, if anything is costing you your dignity, like, you need to disengage. Like, don't beg, don't plead, don't cry, don't fight, don't ever fight over someone. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're not plan B. So that kind of stuff. So if somebody starts kind of getting you into these little games, that's the time to disengage. Like, nope, I sacrifice my dignity to be in a relationship. Like, there's no relationship here if it's requiring me to sacrifice my dignity to stay in it. So, towards the tail, actually, it was pretty much the tail end of my relationship with the second sociopath in my life. It started off, oh man, it was so wild. It was so freaking wild. I had been talking to his wife, who I didn't know was still I didn't know that they were still married. And she had called me, and just when everything started coming out, like, all of the truth, and he didn't know we were talking. And so he's trying to get me to move 26 hours back to where we came from, all of this stuff. Then he was telling me that he was in rehab, and that, which I didn't even realize that he had an alcohol problem. And then it was that he was going to kill himself. And then he was just kitchen sinking it. He was throwing every single thing out there to try to get me to feel pity or sympathy for him, or guilt or love. And it was just wild to sit back there. And here I am, his wife and I are forwarding each other texts. And and I'm just watching all of this. I'm like, this is so wild. He'll sit here, tell me all of this stuff, then hang up, and then they'll go out for dinner, you know? And then she would text me and she's like, yep, he just went to go to the bathroom. She's like, you should probably expect a text in the next few minutes. And sure enough, with more lies, more, it just was like, wow, it was really interesting to just kind of see it for what it was and just to watch it unfold and be like, wow, this is just absurd. Like, you're just a ridiculous human being. Awful, crazy. Yeah, Victoria says, oh my God, Dana, the same thing happened to me. I had no idea he was married until I started talking to his wife. And then all his lies started to unravel. Yeah, it is wild. Oh, Jennifer says, my yogi tea bag says, love yourself so that you may know how to live with self-respect. I love that. Let's see what mine says. Hold on. My yogi tea bag says, oh, so good. We are born wise. We are born complete. I love that. Yogi tea. Yogi tea has our back. I like that. Okay, let's see here. Oh, you do? I was just going to ask if you had tried that Egyptian licorice. She says, I'd love that Egyptian licorice one. I do too. If you've ever been to an Aveda salon, I swear it's the exact same tea. It's so good. And I was going to Aveda whenever I would get my hair done there. I don't go there anymore, but when I was going there, I would probably drink, an absurd amount of tea. It was so good. It's just so good. And I was so thrilled to find it at like the grocery store. And to me, it tastes the exact same and like a tenth of the cost. Okay. Jennifer says, I can't find the mint one though. I really don't think there's much of a taste difference between them. There's the Egyptian licorice and then the Egyptian licorice mint. I don't even know if I could tell the difference. Like, that's how much of a non-difference there is. Okay, let me scroll up here. Slavic Princess says, I'm only undergoing occasional but extreme psychological abuse, such as snarky comments. Yeah, and that stuff can be damaging in its own way. At least you see it for what it is. It really does help to limit the damage when we're able to disengage and we see it as a reflection of them. It's not a reflection of you. There is a concept that she touched on in the book, The Verbally Abusive Relationship, which again is another fantastic book. And she talks about, she's not the one that came up with this concept, but I think this was the best use of this concept, is that there's really two different types of self-esteem out there. And the first type of self-esteem, and I could have the types mixed up, but we'll just go with it. One of the types of self-esteem is where a person like values themselves, that they treat themselves, they have healthy standards, they have healthy boundaries, there is no excuse for abuse. Like, they will not be mistreated by anybody for any reason. And they're like, you know what, my safety and my sanity matters. There's that sense of mutuality of like, yeah, you know what, why not me? Why not you? Like, there's kind of this healthy level of self-esteem. They don't put themselves in harm's way. They don't stay in harm's way. Then the second type of self-esteem is the person who thinks that they deserve to be treated abusively, and that they justify it. Oh, this person had a bad day, or they had a bad childhood, or something happened, and this is, they really didn't mean it, or it wasn't that bad, or this is somehow workable, and they keep justifying it. I thought that was really profound. And I think the good news, though, is that even just being aware that there are two main types of self-esteem that we can fall into, just that awareness that there is another way, that you can move yourself into that other group. I think it's just believing that that's reasonable, because so much of society justifies abuse as, oh, it's the childhood, you've got to be more compassionate, forgive and forget, families forever, all of these beliefs. If you can just realize there's no excuse for abuse, you matter, you have value. Asking to be treated with dignity and respect is not asking too much. And if the people in your life aren't doing that, there's other people that will. And then when you're in a situation, whether it's a friendship, a work environment, a significant other that becomes toxic or problematic, then it very quickly is like, you know what, this is not working for me and I need to leave. And a person's a lot more quickly, they're a lot quicker to leave a toxic situation, versus the other type of self-esteem where a person's like, oh, well, it's okay. There's justifications for being treated abusively, right? And being compassionate by staying. I'm all of this stuff, or maybe I'm a bad person. I grew up, I was told that I was bad, or I was neglected, or I was abused, and so I'm just kind of walking around, and I'm only comfortable. I'm only comfortable when people mistreat me or when they ignore me. When a person has, sorry, that just really kind of hit home. I totally lost my train of thought on that. I'm sorry. I think just what I was trying to say was just realizing, oh, that type of self-esteem, when a person has that and they justify a problematic situation or problematic behavior, they're more inclined to stay in that situation and hang on until they can no longer hang on anymore. And that's what's so heartbreaking and terrifying about about abuse in general, narcissistic abuse, which in my opinion, all abuse is narcissistic, but is that it sometimes can take a person a long time, because things can very quickly become our new normal. And so a person can stay and be dragged through hell for decades before they finally had enough and they finally leave. And even then, when they leave, it's not because they feel like they deserve to be treated any better. It's more of that realization, if I stay, I'm going to be killed. And that's heartbreaking. That's heartbreaking. So I think doing a quick gut check on yourself of what kind of self-esteem do you have? And what would that mean for you? Like, what changes would need to happen if you were to shift into that self-esteem where you're like, you know what, my safety and my sanity matter, and I'm worthy of being treated with dignity and respect, and it's never okay for me to be mistreated. And I'll say too, sometimes I really do fully believe that sometimes people can have a decent level of self-esteem, but man, you fall in love with the wrong person, or you befriend the wrong person. And it's so easy, if you're not aware of this stuff, for them to get their hooks in you and just drag you off into the bushes. And the next thing you know, you've got this really problematic level of self-esteem where you're justifying stuff. So I don't always think that this poor self-esteem is something that develops in childhood. I think it's in large part because this stuff isn't discussed as openly as it needs to be. And if you have children, I would strongly encourage you to have these discussions with them. Okay, there's these two types of self-esteem, and it's very easy for us to justify another person's behavior thinking that we are being compassionate, and to make allowances for it because they have a bad home life, or because they've got a substance problem, or because that's the road to hell. and to talk to them about having that healthier type of self-esteem where it doesn't make you mean or somehow lacking in compassion because you don't stick around to be somebody else's emotional or verbal punching bag or physical punching bag. Like that we can't fix other people. And so having this whole conversation about, all we can control is ourselves, and we can't control them. If your safety or your sanity is in danger, if you're having to sacrifice your dignity, if you're being treated in a way that's lacking in dignity and respect, it's time to go. And really getting clear, because what do we do, right? With kids, like they start dating. I don't even know what age kids start dating these days, but probably pretty young. And what did any of us look for, right? Like, oh, that person's cute. Like that's how that starts out. Or, oh, that person's funny or really smart, or generally those kind of three things, right? And then there's no substance, I guess is what I'm saying. Like we need more than like a good sense of humor or intelligence or, that person's attractive. Like there needs to be more there. Like character is a big one. So I would say character, connection, and chemistry. So we can't just be dating people off of chemistry if that character and that connection isn't there, especially character. If character is not there, it's done. Like there is no working with that. But having these kinds of conversations, it's a big deal. Okay. Yes, Stainless says, 25 years of malignant optimism, not anymore. I've been on my own for 1 year now, never again. Yes, I think that's huge. Like just us seeing the world the way that it really is, and other people in the world the way that they really are. That can be a very rude wake-up call. It really is a lot like the Matrix. You take the red pill and you wake up and you're like, oh, I think I want to go back to sleep. Like if I take the blue pill and everybody's having their, they're able to walk around outside and they're kind of this carefree life, and they, it's not this kind of disturbing reality that they're in. It's like you wake up to this stuff and you see it. And I think the big challenge is waking up to it and realizing, that life it's not fair, but it's still really good. And not letting that truth of problematic behavior in other people and within ourselves, or trauma and abuse, not letting that stuff ruin your life, and still maintaining that ability to be a compassionate, empathetic, caring person, but developing healthy boundaries in doing so. It's a challenge. And sometimes it can feel like walking a tightrope. Okay, let me scroll up here. Hooray says, at Dana, please continue to address how all abuse is narcissistic. That was profound, and I totally agree. More people need to hear. Thanks. Yeah, so the whole concept of narcissistic abuse really started with Alice Miller, and there were a few others. I'm drawing a blank on their names. Back, and I want to say like the 60s and 70s, began noticing, they were studying children and the way that children in dysfunction, like severely dysfunctional homes. So when you've got a home with a parent with either like abuse or alcohol, some sort of addiction, extreme dysfunction in their home. And they began to realize, okay, these children were not able to develop they weren't able to develop their like authentic self, because they were having to basically supplement the needs of their parents. So they couldn't be themselves. It's sort of like I have to be here in order to make sure that my parents are okay. Or, for little boys, it was like, I've got to be the man of the house. Or for little girls, it was like, I've got to be the peacekeeper. And so then these children were basically denied a childhood, and not only denied a childhood, but denied a sense of identity, because we really get our sense of who we are at a fairly young age. And we oftentimes, we really primarily get that from our caregivers, our parents. So there's that constant, babies are like, they're just, their eyes are just locked on you, and they're getting their understanding of the world through you and how you react to them. So if they do something, and little kids too, right? Like when little kids are potty training and they get so excited when they go pee pee in the potty, right? And then everybody kind of just throws this party of like, look at what you did. And then they just feel so good about themselves. And that self-esteem is increasing. And it's that same with any type of behavior. Like they do something right and they'll kind of look and they'll see how people around them respond. Same thing when they do something wrong. So they're getting all of these cues from about who they are and what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. But if a child grows up with parents that are not emotionally connected for whatever reason, maybe they're incredibly depressed, maybe they're profoundly mentally ill and they're not medicated, their parents are abusive, or they're on substances of some kind, and they are just emotionally unavailable for whatever reason to connect effectively to their child. And so there was that level of narcissism because of that. And so then the children, it was like kind of observing these children and how they ended up, maturing out of these types of homes. But in my opinion, it's all abuse stems from narcissism. It stems from that unhealthy ego of, if you think of it on a spectrum of like self-orientation, where on one side you have like self-oriented, and then on the other side you have others-oriented. And so a healthy ego is one where you have like this kind of realistic understanding of yourself and your abilities, and you have goals, and you believe like, hey, I matter. Like, I deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. And I'm worth setting goals. I believe that I can obtain them. If I'm setting really lofty goals that are outside of that might be deemed unrealistic or even delusional by other people, I know that I might not know how to get there, but I can find other people that maybe can mentor me, or I can read, I can learn, and maybe I don't even achieve them, but maybe I get close. So even still, like even kind of setting kind of grandiose goals can be within that realm of like a healthy degree of self-orientation of, like, why not me? Why not you? I can figure it out. I can adjust along the way. I'm worthy of having goals. I have the energy to get out of bed. I have the level of self-direction of, I can figure this out, kind of a thing. That's the zone. So that's kind of the thought of like, where the authentic self would be for all of us would be in that zone. And this is a theory, okay? So that we would be in the zone. If we're not in that zone, it's for some sort of reason. So, and here's the thing. I don't even think it's necessarily about parents. I think that while children are very resilient, I think they're also fragile, not even children, people in general. They're fragile beyond belief. Sometimes I think it's that one event that can be so embarrassing or so shaming or so significant in our life that it can really kind of just change the course that a person goes on. I don't think it even needs to be growing up in an extreme environment. So anyways, so if a person on that level of that spectrum there, if they're more on that side of like, so healthy narcissism, it's like, why not me? Why not you? Level of healthy orientation. Where it gets problematic is when it becomes, it's me versus you. And there's a time and place for competition, but not within your interpersonal relationships, right? Not if you want to keep them. So then as that progresses, then it becomes me at the destruction of you, right? And then more like the malignant end, like me at the death of you. So abuse is in that me versus you onward part of that spectrum. Because an abusive person has to have that mindset of entitlement of like, yeah, you deserve it. And this is somehow appropriate. It's appropriate for me as an adult to bite you, right? Or to call you names, or to have an adult temper tantrum, basically, to cuss and throw things and spit and call names and hit and bite and, just have a level 10 meltdown. Like a person has to have that fight mentality of me versus you in order to act that way. And that stuff is not workable. That's if you're seeing that kind of stuff, it's indicative of some pretty profound kind of wiring issues within another person. Dusk says, how can I teach my child at 4 years old about his dad without making him feel he needs to choose? I wouldn't necessarily talk about his dad directly. So if he's talking about things about his dad, I would validate him. I wouldn't join in on tearing down his dad, because it's still his dad and he's going to get defensive about it. And then it can be kind of stirring the pot, but I would at least validate it. One of the things that, and we'll talk about this more in depth tomorrow, but in Pia Melody's book, The Intimacy Factor, she talks about kind of the dangers of not validating children because we're trying to protect them. And I agree completely with this. So the example she gives in the book is a child sees their drunk parent passed out on the floor smelling like alcohol. And they ask the other parent, is mom or dad drunk? And then the other parent lies and says, oh, no, they're just taking a nap. It's little things like that start separating a person from their truth and start separating. It's gaslighting, and it's eroding their sense of reality. And so when they see a passed out person who's drunk, they start minimizing it. Oh, no, they're just sleeping. They're just drunk. It'll be fine. It's not a problem. On and on and on. So if a child is experiencing dad yelled at me, or he said some things that hurt my feelings, or that was mean, to just acknowledge, yes, I'm sorry that happened to you. That was mean. I wish that he hadn't have said those things to you. That wasn't very nice. So you're talking about it in an age appropriate way, and you're just validating him. And then I would say also, I would encourage you to have other conversations that aren't lumped into like the validation conversation, but where you're making it a point to talk about being nice, again, age appropriate, but you're basically talking about the concepts of dignity and respect. So you're talking about, that it's important that we, talking about what is respect. And maybe if you have animals, like you could talk about it in this term, like this is what it means to be respectful to the cat, right? Like, even though we really want to snuggle with the cat, if the cat doesn't like it and starts hissing and yowling or just fighting us and looks unhappy, we need to let the cat go, right? We need to put him down. Or the dog doesn't like it when we pull its tail. Like, I know you want to play with the dog, but in teaching empathy, right? So like, what does the dog like? Okay, oh, the dog likes bones. The dog likes it when you scratch his ears. The dog doesn't like it. Or the dog likes it when you pet his belly. Does the cat like the same thing? No, the cat doesn't like it when you pet his belly, right? The cat attacks your arm when you do that. So, okay, so animals are different. Okay, so people are different too. And so sometimes we have to learn that everybody likes kind of things their own way, and we have to just kind of be aware of that. And talking about feelings, talking about it's okay to have hurt feelings, that other people's behavior, it's a reflection of them. It's not a reflection of you, and kind of what that means. And I would have the conversation about having two buckets, you keep your hurt feelings and your self-worth in two different buckets, because sometimes people can be mean and they can say hurtful things, and it's okay to cry. It's okay to be upset, but you keep that in your hurt feelings bucket, but don't let that spill over into thinking that you're bad and that you're wrong, and that, keep that stuff in the right bucket, I guess. And having those conversations on an ongoing basis. And then also letting your child know, like, basically let it, like, this is a safe space here, like, I love you. I will always love you. And I really want us to be able to talk about things. And I know certain things can be uncomfortable, but it's okay. Like, I'm your mom or I'm your dad. I can handle this stuff. And let's let's just talk about stuff. Okay. And kind of keeping that door open and letting them know, like, it's, especially as they get older, that they don't have to choose sides. And, uh, that it's okay. It's okay to feel how you feel. Like, it's hard. It's really hard. It's hard growing up with divorced parents. It's hard growing up when you've got one parent who's abusive or a narcissist, and the child's like, my other parent's a jerk, but they're also my parent, and I don't know how I feel. And it's just it's a lot for anybody to navigate, but especially a child. So Eric says, man, anyone in my life has been a narcissist in the last few years. My self-worth has been compromised intentionally and unintentionally so many times. I'm beginning to get it wasn't my fault, and it will take time. Yeah. I think really just making that shift of, like, it's just not internalizing that, it's hard, and it's hard, but it can be a very powerful skill, that can really serve you well the rest of your life, if you can get that down. So, okay, let's see here. Let me scroll up. Victoria says, Dana, my ex narcissist lost his mother when he was 10, and then his father got sick and he had to take care of his dad until he died on Christmas Eve. How would trauma like that cause NPD? Well, my guess, just to, my guess with that kind of stuff is, here you have a child who's needed to grow up very fast, right? He had the death of his mother, and then he had to take care of his father, which that stuff is so far beyond what even an adult could handle, but let alone a young child. That's way too much adult stuff for any kid, to have. So I could see how a person could put up a bunch of walls, kind of subconsciously. They're like, you know what, I just, attaching to other people isn't safe, and out of potentially like low self-esteem or feeling of inadequacy, which I would imagine, that would happen as well. Like, and just feeling different, where you just start developing all of these unhealthy defense mechanisms. I had a friend of mine, this was years ago. She was married to a guy who was like textbook narcissist. This guy was arrogant. He was just so over the top. He thought the way that he thought he came across and the way that he actually came across were two very different things. And everything with him was like the best. And he would always go to these great lengths to try to like impress people, but it always had that, like, he didn't realize that it had the opposite effect. It didn't impress people. It just turned him off. And it just reeked of like low self-esteem and just desperation. And anyways, one, I think it, I don't know if it was him or if it was my friend who had said, I don't even remember how we got to talking about it. Somebody had made the comment that his mother, they grew up without a lot of money, and his mother had sent him to school. It was, I don't know if it was a presentation or school photos, I don't remember. And everybody was making fun of him. And it was like that day, just the switch flipped in his brain. And so he just decided that he'll never feel that way again. And so he was always overdressed from that point on. And in his mind, that was his way of staying safe and feeling confident and, just kind of having that one-up position on everybody. So that's what I was saying. Like, sometimes I don't think that it's necessarily the events that we think cause, like, people are just so fragile, and sometimes it just doesn't take a whole lot for things to kind of go a certain direction, and for different people. Bear, thank you for the live stream donation. He says, so biting people is bad? Yes, biting people is bad. Don't do that. Here's another example. I knew a guy, this was years ago. He kind of a similar situation. He grew up, his mother had emphysema and it was sick his whole childhood. It was pretty much bedridden. And so he was an only child, and there was no fun. He had to grow up and be an adult. They lived on a farm, and his father was, he had a sick wife at home. He had to raise this child, and he had a farm. And so his childhood was not fun. And like as an adult, he didn't have hardly any extended family. Like there was just really nobody there in his life. And it was interesting because once I began learning about that, I'm like, oh my gosh, you start seeing like how these different events impact a person, and you could see it. You're like, yeah, I get it. Like this guy has so many different walls up. And just this inability to connect to people. It was sad. It's sad. But it is like, we can't fix that. You know what I mean? Like that it's done. And if they wanted to work on that, it would be an uphill climb for them to work on it. And you think about with us and our stuff, being more I think most of us were more on the opposite side of the spectrum. So like I was talking about earlier, it's that spectrum of self-orientation, where on that one side you have, it's kind of these overtakers. Then the other side, you have overgivers. And many of us tend to be more on the overgivers side of the spectrum. And so we tend to be people pleasing, and we don't like conflict. We don't like confrontation. We say yes when we mean no. We go along in order to get along. We really erode. If we ever even had a solid sense of identity, it tends to be very fluid. Kind of, we're just trying to fit in with the environment, just to have peace in our lives. And how difficult it is for so many of us to even get to modify our own behavior to where we can get a degree of self-protection back, to realize that your safety and your sanity matter. That's really wild when you think about it, because that stuff's probably the number one most deeply ingrained thing in any human being is self-protection. That's where that whole fight or flight response kicks in. And it's like we have numbed that out. So even though we're experiencing a tremendous amount of pain from our actions, we've been trying to fix or love or befriend all of these people that continually hurt us. We stay until we can't hang on anymore. We're all of these things that are not working for us. knowing, wanting to change, being here, right? Being on these live streams and watching videos and reading books and doing all stuff. We're actively engaged. Like I want my life to work. I want my life to work. What do I need to have my life work? It's even still having that driving desire to make our lives work. And it's still incredibly hard for us to get back into alignment where we can get to that place of, yeah, why not me? Why not you? You know what? I matter and so do you. And my wants and my needs and my feelings matter and so do yours. And, you know, dignity and respect and your safety and sanity mattering, like getting us, and we even understand these concepts, right? But we understand them for other people. Like that's why we would be horrified if we had a child that was in these types of relationships. But it's fine for us. And that's shows that something's really off. So it's interesting when you start waking up to all this. Okay. Eric asks, what do you guys call it again when the narcopath or whatever comes back or tries to come back? We call it a Hoover, like the Hoover vacuum. So they'll start saying everything that they think that you need to say in order to get you to reopen contact. Anything. They might tell you that they have cancer, or that they're suicidal, or that this time is different, or that they changed, or that they're in therapy, or they might cry, they might beg, they might call you and say, I'm willing to forgive you for the things that you've done. It might even be something simple like, hi, or a text pretending to be to the wrong number. And so then you're just confused, like, what? Or it might be a text about something like, oh, I heard your favorite band is coming into town to play. Like, would you want to go? And then you're totally knocked off balance. Like, wait, what? Like, we're not cool. Like, why are you texting me asking if I want to go to a show with you? Like, no, I don't. Like, it's weird that you would think that I would want to. Things like that. It's just any type, really, any type of communication designed to reopen contact with the intention of getting you back in. So even no matter how seemingly innocent you're opening that door back up. So, okay. Jennifer is talking about bullying and says, yes, I was also bullied at every school I moved to until about the age of 13 when I moved to the US. So now I always feel the need to be presentable and have some amount of makeup on when I go outside. Oh, that's so sad. It's amazing the stuff that this can do to us. Yeah, I'm so sorry that you're going through that. And that's a long time to be bullied. I hope that you can see that you are a warrior for surviving all of that. That's a long time to be bullied, and that's a lot of stuff to make it through. And yeah, and goodness. Okay, let's scroll up here. Charlotte says, what if the narcissist says he hates women? I would consider that a warning sign. If somebody tells you, or they start acting, because I think it's very rare that you get the benefit of full clarity like that somebody flat out will tell you, yeah, I hate women. Yeah, and I hate Black people, and I hate rich people, and hate the Jews too. It's very rare that somebody will come right out and be that open about like their beliefs. But when somebody does come out and says stuff like that, whatever it is that they might hate, if it's a group of people, that's a problem. And to not try to gloss over that or to rewrite reality or to justify it and think, oh, well, you know, they grew up, it's their generation. I get that one a lot with abuse. People will say, I have a friend of mine who was 50 and he was talking about his father and who was verbally and physically abusive to them. And it's like, well, you know, it was just that generation. And it's like, no, it wasn't. Like, it was more prevalent in that generation, but there were lots of people who didn't, you know, beat their children with a belt and verbally, you know, scream and yell and have everybody walking on eggshells all the time. Anyways, point being, so yeah, if somebody's basically telling you, yeah, I'm racist, I'm sexist, I'm bigoted, I'm whatever, like believe them, because these are the signs. And especially if you are something that they hate, then like you're not going to change them. I think that's really important to realize. If anything, especially it's really wild when you get that person who has a ton of unresolved issues or fears or because I think really any type of ism, racism, sexism, any of that kind of stuff is based in fear. When a person has that and we are that they are afraid of or that they hate, you know, you are potentially in very serious danger, because anything that you do that doesn't line, they're going to potentially be so triggered by anything that you do that it's going to be a losing battle. And they're going to always, they have a ton of walls up and it's just going to be really difficult to get through. So yeah, if a male or female, like I did not realize that, maybe this is very ignorant, I did not realize that women could be misogynistic. I always thought that was like men hating women. I didn't realize that women could hate women as well. And now that I see that, I'm like, oh, yeah, there's a few YouTube channels out there where I try to watch a wide variety of stuff just to kind of keep up with things. And it's very interesting when you see a lot of that kind of stuff. Women hating women, you know, men hating men, women hating men, men hating women, all of that. Anybody hating anybody else is a problem. But yeah, like if you are that, then expect that they at some point are most likely going to turn and lash out against you, and they're going to feel justified in doing so. And this stuff too, the hatred, it can be so subtle and it can be so insidious, where it might start off as something like, well, you know, I don't normally trust women, but you're different. And so right away, at the time, like if you're on the receiving end of that, you might even feel like special or like flattered. You know, like I don't trust anybody, but I trust you. But then the downside to that is then you're kind of placed on this pedestal, right? Like of like, other women have hurt me, but I need you to never hurt me. And it's sort of like, okay, I'm never going to intentionally hurt you, but I might accidentally do something that hurts you. I might hurt your feelings. I might act in a way that's somehow hurtful to you, but like, let's talk, you know, we need to be able to talk about it. Just like you might inadvertently hurt me. And so if that happens, we need to talk to each other. This is kind of as an aside, when somebody tells you, when they're reassuring you, I would never hurt you, that is that in itself is a problem, because odds are, well, first of all, people shouldn't need to reassure each other that they're not going to hurt each other. Like, that's just weird. That's like me saying, I'm never going to steal your purse. Like, like you would think, like, I would hope not, right? Like, you shouldn't even have to say that. But more than that, it's conflict happens in relationships. An absence of conflict, an absence of hurt feelings isn't a sign of a healthy relationship. It's oftentimes a symptom of ineffective communication. So people are going to have, things are going to happen, conflicts are going to happen, some hurt feelings might happen, as long as it's not intentional, like intentionally putting somebody down, right? But it's the ability of two people to be able to address that stuff. Anyways, that was an aside. But so if somebody starts in on, oh, well, you know what? I've never dated a white girl before. Like you're different, you're special, you're unique. I don't normally trust white women, but I trust you. And then it's kind of this sense of obligation of, okay, I want this person to be able to trust white people again, right? Or white women. And so I want, then we start bending and whatever, I mean, insert race, religion, nationality, gender, sexual orientation, you name it, right? It's the same kind of thing. So then we're starting to walk on eggshells because we want this person to feel safe and to be okay and to heal. But then if any little thing, because this is such an unhealed wound for them, that if any little thing happens and they're triggered, they're immediately going to jump back to, it's that thing that they fear, that's the problem. And then it's going to reinforce to them that they should have never trusted you in the first place. And then that abuse cycle is going to start. Oh, another white woman let me down. I'm gonna, or, you know, or another, anything, woman in general let me down. And so it's women are the problem. You can't trust them. You just don't ever get attached to them. They're just gold diggers. They'll never love you. They're incapable of love. Do you see what I'm saying? Like that, it's not you. And we can't fix a person, and we can't twist ourselves into enough of a pretzel in order to heal all of their wounds, because they're going to be on high alert looking for any little thing to reinforce that existing belief that women can't be trusted. Okay. Charlotte says, yeah, you said all women are the same. That kind of thing. And the flip side of that with women, watching out for the same thing. So I think that the concept of, you know, misogyny, it's more understood of like men hating women, you know, but I think, like I was saying, it's important to see that women can hate women too. And just to see it's the behavior, it's not the gender. And it's the same thing with women. There's a lot of women that hate men. And the term for that is misandry. So again, if we can, it's so important that we see the behavior, because if we don't, and I'm not trying to convince anybody to do anything that they don't feel safe with. If a person's like, you know what, that's it, I'm done with women, or I'm done with men, you know, like, I'm not trying to convince you otherwise. Like, I get having walls up, I get taking a step back, I get that, but I'm encouraging you to see it as the behavior, because if you don't see it as the behavior, if you only see it as a gender or a religion, or if you're compartmentalizing it like that, your world is going to continue to get smaller and smaller. The more people that violate your trust, if you don't see it as the behavior and not the religion, the gender, the sexual orientation, and so on. Yes, Karen, you're absolutely right. Says Dana, also narcissists use this to groom their victims. Yes, they absolutely do. And so it is kind of that saying, you know, what we were talking about earlier is it might start off with subtly, oh, well, you know, my ex did X, Y, and Z. You know, she or he was, and it can be in ways that are, it could be like a full out manipulation, like them planting the seeds of things, or it can just be like their own just twisted delusional reality. So here's an example of them planting seeds early on when they really don't even have an issue, but them planting seeds early on. So they might say something like, well, you know, it's so nice that you're so different from my ex. You know, he or she really had an issue that I had so many female friends, or male friends, whatever, so many female friends. And it's so great that you're so secure with yourself that doesn't bother you. And so that actually, let's talk about this for a little bit, because I think this is a good example. This is something that people tend to encounter. Okay, so saying that, and again, insert whatever gender. I'm just going to talk in terms of male, female, because it's easier for my brain to think that way, because that's what I've encountered. Okay, but flip it to whatever works for you, or whatever you've encountered. When a person says something like that, and they say, "Oh, yeah, my ex was so insecure and just didn't like the fact that I had female friends, but I really love that you're okay with that." And so you might feel like, huh, that's weird. Like, that's kind of doesn't sit right with me. It's so paying attention to that feeling. It's that sense of confusion of, I don't know if I'm okay with this person having, a bunch of female friends. Like, is it me or is it him? Right? It's that introspection kicks off. Or with a guy, is it me or is it her? Like, I don't know if I'm okay with her having all these male friends and these, are these really, like, is it, I don't want to be jealous. I don't want to be controlling, but like, I don't know if I'm cool if she's still hanging out with all these guys she slept with, and vice versa. Right? Paying attention to that feeling and understanding that you don't feel that way around something that doesn't feel squirrely. So if it's uncomfortable for you, we don't need to stick around and wait for them to cheat on us, or wait to get to the bottom of things, or gather up more information. If something feels off to you, it's okay for that to be all the information you need, and to be like, you know what, I don't do squirrely. Like, I don't want to date somebody that's got a bunch of quote unquote friends and they've slept with all of them, or they continue to sleep with them whenever they're single. Like, I don't want that. Like, that's okay. And so yeah, so they'll start planting seeds. This is very common. So they'll start planting seeds. And then the more you're in this relationship, so then now you're like, well, I can't say anything because I don't want to be like his ex, right? His ex had an issue with all of these female friends. And I mean, I guess this is 2018, right? I want to be progressive. I don't want to be controlling. I don't want to be jealous or insecure. So I'm just going to continue to allow this to go on. And I'm not going to not continue to allow this to go on. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to voice my concerns because I don't want this relationship to end. That's when that cognitive dissonance really kicks in, and then it starts growing into discomfort and then mental anguish. And then you're just silencing yourself because it's like, well, I don't want the relationship to end. I don't want to be like his ex. But a lot of times that's what manipulators will do. They'll plant seeds early on, teaching you, if you do X, Y, and Z, then things are over. So yeah, trying to think of some other ways, planting kind of some seeds. It's interesting when you start seeing this kind of stuff for what it is. And again, it's the behavior. If you can see this kind of stuff, you might start seeing this at work, like with coworkers or within your family or with your next door neighbor or people that you volunteer with or that you go to church with. If you can see this kind of stuff for what it is earlier on, it's so much easier to just hop out of harm's way than to try to stay in it and navigate it and, deal with it and heal from it and everything else. Yeah. Kevin, I've had that same experience. Kevin says, boy, I hear that. I remember early with my narcissist, she put me at an event with a former lover. It made me uneasy and continues to do it this way. Yeah, that kind of stuff. It's a weird form of triangulation where they don't necessarily stir the pot, but they put all the ingredients in. And then they just kind of wait for things to unfold. So I've mentioned this before. It's been an absolute game changer for me to kind of to tighten up my boundaries and my standards to the point where it's like, you know what? I don't do perpetual confusion. I don't do crazy making, and squirrely behavior. That kind of stuff is within crazy making. And I'm not I don't normally feel jealous, insecure, these kinds of feelings. If I'm feeling like that kind of stuff is being, those little buttons are being pushed, then those are signs I need to go. I had a very similar situation. This 20 something years ago, a guy I was dating had that. I actually had just recently broken up with him for crazy making. I didn't have the term at the time, but it was like, he was so cool. Like we were friends, but then it was just this constant like drama. And at the time I remember thinking like, it's seriously like dating a high school girl. Like this is so, I've never met a guy that's so drama. And this guy is so freaking drama. It was just exhausting. And we had tickets to this concert. We'd gotten them like 6 months earlier. And so we were all there and we were still, it was one of those things like, oh, we're still going to try to be friendly because we all hung out in the same crowd. And it was my favorite band that from way back when that was playing. And so it was like the best night of my life. Right. And so I am super excited. And it was like, it's just so funny to see this stuff for what it is now, like with the clarity you have now, you know? And he came up to me at one point in the concert, again, best night of my life. I was so in love with the lead singer. And like, I could have died that night and been totally happy. Like, I just was so thrilled to be there. So he comes up to me and he's like, well, I hope it's not awkward that like my new girlfriend is here. And it was just so ridiculous. I'm like, dude, I A, broke up with you, and B, no, like I am so a million miles away from caring. I could be on fire right now and I'm not even sure if I would notice. Like I was so focused on hearing the band play that it just was weird. And it was weird to me. I'm like, why would you even think that I care at all anyhow? And, or like, especially on this night, it was just so stupid. Frustrating. Crazy, crazy. Okay. Ugh, Missouri Cowboy says, yeah. Uh, I, I, I used to accept everything as it was told to me. The abusers would tell me if I asked for proof, if you loved me, you would trust me. Ew. Yeah. Yeah. That's, and like so many things where it's like, dude, I, I trust behavior. It's what I trust. Like if you've got a bunch, like prove it. Like if you've got a bunch of, oh, it's just so frustrating. Like if you've got a bunch of squirrely behavior, you know, and that's what's so confusing, I think, to us, where it's sort of like we try to flip it around and we're like, well, yeah, I want you to trust me too, but like I haven't done anything untrustworthy, so like you have no reason to not trust me. But we're trying to figure out like the gap in logic there on their end. And but when you're in it and you don't know what manipulation really is, or like all the different ways that it can go down, like trying to kind of navigate through conversations like that on the fly is difficult. Uh, Jennifer saying her narcissist father has an IQ of 144 and her boyfriend is at 162. And Missouri Cowboy brings up a great point. Says, did you actually see verification of that? I would agree, because it's amazing. People say anything. And not only that, but they could have done like an IQ test online, which score way higher than an actual IQ test. And even still, even if they did score at 160, it's a data point. It's not the end all be all. There's a lot of other factors that go into play. I mean, like you can be a savant and score off the charts with an IQ test. That doesn't mean that you can actually navigate life effectively. So it's, you know, it shows that they can score really well on this test and that they have certain, in theory, that they have certain, you know, abilities with you know, problem solving skills, but it's definitely like not the end all be all. Okay. Bonnie was talking to Jennifer and says, I'm still super self-conscious about my intellectual abilities. When I took an IQ test in college, I found my IQ was genius level. I finally accepted that I actually might be smart. Yeah. And I think too, realizing that no matter where your IQ falls, if you have that growth mindset of I can figure it out. Like I will figure it out. If I don't know it, I can work hard and I can figure it out. Like that matters more, in my opinion, than just having a high IQ. So it's that ability to just kind of dig in, and determination goes so far. I was talking to a person the other day, it was in my writing group, that's where it was, about skill. And there was an acquaintance of mine, this was probably 10 years ago. He really wanted to get into like motivational speaking. Totally the right person for it. He's got the attitude, he's just the energy, like the mindset, like he just, that's, yeah, like he is the right person to be doing that. But he was super self-conscious about, this was back when people like would start a blog, and like that was the real kind of, before YouTube, before Twitter, before Facebook, before MySpace, so you basically had a blog. And so he was having to write. Well, he really struggled in school. He struggled with writing. And I remember him posting some of his articles, and me and this other gal would proofread them for him and give him feedback and stuff. And it was a beginning. They were pretty rough. But so anyways, we ended this group that we were all in, ended up kind of just over time going our separate ways. And anyway, I think it was so, long story short, fast forward, he kept at it. He kept writing and he kept improving and he kept having that growth mindset of this. He just dug his heels in. He's like, this is really what I want to do with my life. And, realized, okay, I'm not a strong writer, but I can become one, and just stayed with it. And now he works for Tony Robbins. And I'm sure he probably, I don't know if he does, if he's starting to teach like his own material, but he does write and he's fantastic. I mean, my jaw was just wide open when I saw how far he'd come. So just because we're not maybe inherently, our IQ is not at a certain level, or we're not inherently like naturally gifted at something, doesn't mean that we have to just stay stuck there. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's see. Victoria says, my IQ level is genius level too, but I think EQ is much more important and mine seems to be below average. Well, I think I don't know if I would agree with that, just kind of based on some of the questions that you've had tonight, but the cool thing, especially with EQ, is that it's definitely a teachable, learnable skill. And I think you'll be surprised the more that you're diving into all of this and having these conversations, because this is pretty much all we talk about on this channel all the time, is about personal growth and emotional awareness and all of this kind of stuff. So, uh, the cool thing is, like, you don't need to have it all figured out in order for it to like radically change your life. Just having a few things figured out just radically changes the trajectory of your life. And then it starts to really kind of snowball. where you're picking up more and more concepts and you're seeing different ways to apply them. And then it just gets exciting. Even like this, reading this Pia Melody book today, I kept thinking, I'm like, man, this would have been one of the books or the type of book that I would have picked up 10, even 5 years ago. And I would have very quickly dismissed it as just psychobabble. And I would have gotten nothing out of it. And I was thinking about today, I'm like, wow, how different it is that I can read this today and I see what she's talking about, and I'm seeing how it's applies to so much. So I guess the point is, like, we're all learning and growing, and the more you learn about yourself and your boundaries and your standards and your deal breakers and your intuition in terms of your natural instincts and what it feels like to be in tune with yourself and what it feels like to be out of tune, and what a nourishing situation feels like and what a toxic situation feels like, and how to learning to navigate those types of situations with being assertive or with just completely going no contact. All of this stuff is just such an absolute game changer. And it's amazing. I would be curious to hear when you guys first started down this path of like emotional health kind of stuff, how long, like when did you start noticing shifts in your life? Like how long do you feel like that took? And how much information were you consuming before you began to notice shifts? If that makes any sense. I'll be curious to hear what you guys have to say. Okay, let me scroll up here. Yeah, Missouri Cowboys talking about narcissists targeting those with things to offer. Yeah, they'll either, so IQ, caring, sharing, good people, they either target them to exploit them, or they target that it goes back to like that really broken authentic self that they have. Like they don't have a healthy ego. It's that child's mindset, right? Like if somebody else has a really nice toy and that child wants that toy but they can't have it, that child might go over there and they might break it, because it's sort of like, well, if I can't have it, then you can't have it either. And that, that's a problem. Instead of having that, like that mindset of mutuality where it's like, okay, this other person has something that's really cool, maybe they'll let me play with their toy. Like, that's learning to get your needs met, that sense of mutuality. It's not viewing other people as competition. It's sort of like, wow, that new kid has a really cool toy. I'd really like to play with that. I wonder if he'd let me. Maybe we can do a trade. Maybe I can give him like my cookie, right? Or my bag of chips. And then maybe he'll let me play with his toy. Like that's kind of how kids start navigating that sense of like mutuality and teamwork when they're trying to get their needs met. But with people that have walls up and they're locked into this unhealthy ego, it's very much of like getting close to you is potentially risking something. I can't risk it. And I'm just jealous and envious and I just want what you have. And because I can't have it, then you can't have it either. And they're just bratty and destructive is what it is. If it's intentional, if it's more of that malignant kind of stuff, if they're intentionally going out targeting people for whatever reason, if it's something they see within themselves that they don't like. A great example of this would be the documentary we have talked about multiple times called Tickled, where there's this guy who goes around. There's kind of talk that he's probably gay, but was never open about it. And then he began putting these ads on Craigslist and getting these high school like straight guys offering in poor areas and offering them money to come be tickled. And it wasn't sexual, it was like a little like homoerotic, but it was nothing like porn or anything. It was just, but it was walking that line. You know what I mean? Like guys with their shirts off and kind of tickling each other and stuff like that. But then the guys would leave, they'd get their money, they would leave. And then he would intentionally try to destroy their lives. And so then he was putting these videos on the internet. He was sending them to like their high school and college, like football coaches and classmates, and being like, you don't really want a gay person on your team. Boy, it would really be awful if your school were to get all of this unwanted press, and like, trying to ruin these guys' lives. It was, and just crazy. So that level of malignancy, I think, is less common than just straight up difficult, crazy making, triangulating, pot stirring, gaslighting narcissists. Like that malignant, psychopathic like level of hunting down people with the intention of destroying them is its own ball game. But yeah, that's wild. And you watch the documentary and you kind of start piecing two and two together. Like, yeah, this guy is probably a latent homosexual. He hates that part about himself. And so he's setting up these other, like, you can kind of see how he's like enacting this, setting up these different kind of like fringe homoerotic scenarios and then punishing these guys for this part of himself that he's not okay with. Like, wow, I was just really wild. Yes, Bonnie says, the next step in emotional intelligence for me is correctly identifying my own emotions and then dealing with emotional flashbacks. That's huge. Those are both going to be absolute game changers. And I'll tell you what I think you'll find, what I think most people find with any of this, myself included, like with any of this stuff, is, and this is where it gets to be kind of fun. And it can be a little unnerving at times too. But when you start bringing like different levels, when the stuff starts to surface and it starts making itself aware, and you're like, okay, oh, I get it now. Like, I understand what these emotions were trying to tell me. Like, I wasn't just being overly emotional or too sensitive or distrusting or paranoid or whatever. Like, this emotion was actually signaling to me that something was off, or that this was uncomfortable, or that this person or situation was emotionally unsafe. Like, you're starting, I just get so excited for people that are learning this, because it's just such a game changer. But when you start having that level of awareness, it's the more obvious ones are going to surface first. Okay. And so it's cool, because then you're like, man, okay, I think I got a lot of this stuff figured out. And then as you continue moving forward and learning about this stuff, the more, it's just all of these like subtleties the less obvious stuff is going to continue to surface. And then that's really interesting, because you're like, what? I thought I had this stuff figured out and there was more. But it's cool in the sense that it keeps giving you all of this awareness about yourself. And it's a difficult journey, but oh man, it's so rewarding, and it's just so cool. Okay, let me scroll down. Yeah. JJ says, usually I'm not concerned about the obvious ones. We're talking about narcissists and manipulators here. He says, I can see them. It's the unaware coverts or the aware coverts that put on masks that are so dangerous for me. Beware of actors. Yeah. I'll tell you though, and this is terrifying to most people. And I think it's one of the hardest things to really heal from, because when you're dealing with an overtly abusive or problematic person, it's like dealing with a snake in the street. Like we can talk about overt techniques, the yelling, the jealousy, the control, the put downs, the this, the that, you know, the rage, that kind of stuff. That stuff, it is the snake in the street, and those coverts, the charm, the Bill Cosbys, the Scott Petersons, the Casey Anthonys, those kinds of people can really fly under a person's radar, and it can be so difficult to heal from, because it's hard to be able to pinpoint like what can I glean out of this in order to help keep myself safe in the future. Probably the biggest takeaway I had after my first relationship with that sociopath ended, because for years, I was like, I don't know what I did wrong. What did I miss? Like, what signs did I miss? And I really had to and everybody around me was like, Dana, it was a fluke. Like, you were targeted. It was like a hit and run accident. And there was nothing. Like, what could you have done? Like, what, how would you have ever known that this person had this crazy double life and was a pathological liar and all of this stuff? And the one thing that kept me awake at night, it was just the thought of like, none of it sat right with me from the beginning. My intuition was screaming at me, and I glossed over it. And again, that threw me off for years, because I still at that time had the mindset of like, you need solid proof that there's a problem. And if you don't have solid proof that there's a problem, then you're being judgmental, basically. Or that you're somehow acting out of like unhealed wounds, especially if somebody's charming. Oh God, like that screwed me up for years, especially in therapy, because it was very much treated, when I was so terrified to date or even make friends or get back out into life after that, it was very much treated like your hesitation is because of this trauma, this unhealed trauma. And I kept having, there was a handful of people over a handful of years that were the same. I'm like, man, I've like, I know I've had this feeling before, and it almost killed me. And but we would go through these things in therapy, and it was very much like, well, no, this person's safe and they're charming. And I'm like, I can't shake it. There's something that's off. And years in therapy, basically gaslighting myself and having that feeling be minimized, just makes me so angry. Because oh God, because even at that time, like when I was working in a domestic violence center, it was very much, you're taught the overt signs of abuse, the jealousy, the control, the rage, the hot, cold, the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, that kind of stuff, charm, finessing, Prince Charming, that kind of stuff was never even on my radar as a potential problem. And so then once I learned that actually was a problem, it was a game changer. But I think there's a lot of therapists out there that don't understand that either. And so then they're trying to help people stay safe by avoiding the snake in the street, but that's not the problem. It's the snake in the grass. That's the problem. And I guess what I'm saying, the big takeaway from that is turning inward, and getting, and this is so hard to do, especially if you're struggling with CPTSD, to listen to your intuition, because it can feel like, no, my intuition's telling me that everybody's a problem and I'm terrified and I don't want to go outside and I don't trust, and all, like, you're on high alert. It can be really difficult. If you can get yourself grounded enough over time, this oftentimes just takes time to realize that when you're feeling that way, and sometimes it might take a while, it might take a week or two of being around a person. Sometimes it's right away. I mean, I'm at the point now in my life, it's right away. It's within 5 minutes. And I used to doubt that, especially if I really wanted it to work out. Like, oh, this person seems so awesome, or they, you know, like whatever. It's like, it's that feeling. And I think you'll notice the more you tune into that, you'll notice like you don't feel like that around emotionally safe people. It's just you pick up your body and brain picks up on insincerity on many different levels. And so that's what I think we're really picking up on. And that's what's making us feel emotionally unsafe, is that level of insincerity. And if you can get to that place where you're like, okay, that's the only sign I need. Like, I don't need to wait for them to prove me right, that they actually have bad intentions, is a big thing. Yeah, it's the spite. Lucy says it's the spidey sense. Yep. JJ says, yes, I'm listening, trying to learn. Thank you, Dana. I have been all of those. I remember my gut piping up at times, but ignoring it. I must not ignore it. I'm so sorry I didn't. Yeah. And you probably heard me talk about this. I had a friend at the time who gave me one of these little like quote flip book kind of inspirational things. And one of them was from Joseph Campbell. And the quote was, "Follow your bliss." And I remember staring at that thinking like, I used to really believe in that quote. I used to be all about follow your bliss. Like, your heart will never lead you wrong. And here I was, I'm like, this almost got me killed. So it was just weird having this like standoff in my kitchen, like me versus this quote flip book, right? And just staring at it and thinking like, what am I missing? What am I missing? And then it was the realization of, yes, follow your bliss, but never at the expense of following your peace. If something inside of you is telling you, slow down, this is wrong, or run, listen to that. So that's the hard part with the charming ones, that the ones that sell you a dream and they later deliver a nightmare. When they're selling you that dream, we want so much to believe in it. People that got caught up with Bernie Madoff wanted so much to believe in it. The people that got caught up with Bill Cosby that thought he'd be able to help their career wanted so much to believe in that. When people get caught up with all kinds of online dating scams, male or female, they want so much to believe that. And then, but deep down, there's things that you're picking up on that and it can be hard to walk away from the bliss, but you've got to, if your inner peace is being negatively impacted or is screaming at you. Okay, let's see here. Let me scroll up here. Yeah, up yours, Narc says, your body doesn't believe the lies. You just need to be tuned into it. Yeah. And that's the best way to keep yourself safe down the road, especially with covert ones. Because here's the reality, like the internet trolls of the world, the manipulators, the narcissists, all the problematic people probably watch all this stuff too. So this is why I talk about, like, we can talk about tactics all day long, but once people stop falling for the tactics, the manipulator will shift the tactics. So talking about tactics can be helpful to an extent. The one thing that they can't ever take away from you and that they can't change up enough to throw you off is how you feel internally. And that's a powerful feeling. But the catch is, the challenge with that is you will never know if you were right. So you have to be able to take comfort. If you can make your new standard of, I don't like feeling that fluttering inside of me and that introspection. Is it me? Is it them? Do I have issues? Is it my PTSD? Is it commitment? Is it like when you're that waffling? If you find yourself waffling, and if you're like, you know what, I only do this around manipulative, sociopathic people, which is probably the case, it's time to go. but pay attention. You don't have that waffling around emotionally safe people. And so when that waffling, like fluttering feeling comes up, it's time to take some steps back. Ideally, go no contact immediately. And again, like it's hard when a person's like really good looking and they approach you and you can feel so chosen almost, right? And special, and or they've got this great business deal, or they seem like they take this interest in you, and they seem like they're the answer to your prayers. If you're finding yourself using that wording, this perfect person is a perfect person, they're a soulmate, they're the person I've been praying for, these are all signs that you're not seeing them clearly. And it's go slow, because predators can really do a good job at coming across that way. So just know that it's not always a good feeling when we feel like our prayers have been answered, we've met our soulmate. More often than not, it's, does not end well. Video says the hardest part was feeling that gut feeling and hearing people telling me I'm not being Christian towards the narc. Well, I guess my response to that would be the Bible is very clear and very much encourages the ability of spiritual discernment. And I think this is exactly what the Bible is talking about. So this whole concept, I mean, it's just, if a person doesn't have that level of discernment, they are really vulnerable, really, really vulnerable, and they don't realize it. So that level of discernment, if you're Christian, spiritual discernment, kind of being able to tell right from wrong, good for bad, hurtful from helpful, kind of a thing. Compassion, people will talk about, oh, it's biblical, you've got to have compassion and forgiveness and all of this, and that stuff gets so muddled around with allowance of bad behavior. And again, the Bible is very clear about, kind of spiritual warfare and not having this kind of stuff in your life. So don't get deceived and led off path by people that are talking out of context, because that's what it is. I think there was a Dalai Lama who said, your compassion is not complete unless it includes yourself. If you're being compassionate towards another person, but it's sinking you, it's hurting you, then you're not being compassionate. Like, it's got to include yourself. I think that's a great way of saying it, Truth Seeker. Truth Seeker says discernment is divine communication. Yeah, I think it's definitely that connection to some sort of outer awareness, whether you want to call that like a divine connection or however you want to think of it, but it is. And I think that's why it's so hard for us to understand it, because it's not logical. And for so many of us, I think probably, I think for so many of us, it's this idea that if we can't make logical sense of it, then it's not valid. And so instincts, if you could understand your intuition as it's not this hippie woo-woo kind of a new agey thing, it's your instinct, your animal instinct. And you think about how lost any other animal would be in their natural habitat if they didn't have instincts. They wouldn't last for very long. And it's human beings, when we developed that prefrontal cortex and that logic and critical thinking part of our brain, it was like our brain, we kind of somehow got that lost. And we were like, no, we don't need instincts. These emotions are just fluffy and they're not really needed. And we don't need, animal instincts. That's so beneath us. We are logical creatures. And that's so far from the truth. That part of our brain is it's like 100,000 years old. It's not very old at all. Those other parts of our brain, especially the limbic system, the emotional centers of your brain, it's the largest part of your brain. And it communicates through your vagus through your vagus nerve, it touches almost every single organ in your body. And we don't process information from like the top down. We process information from the bottom up of our brain. So that information goes through all like your fight, your flight, your basic like reptilian brain. Then it moves up through your limbic system, to like your emotional brain. Then it moves up to your logic and critical thinking part of your brain. And all this happens in like a second. But the problem is by the time that information gets to our logic and critical thinking part of our brain, we've lost so much of it. We've either justified it, we've glossed it over, we just don't understand it, so it doesn't compute. We've filtered it through our understandings of reality and our perceptions of things and our past experiences. Like that information is so diluted and convoluted that we think that we're rational people, but we're not. More often than not, we're rationalizing. And this is why it's so important to listen to these other parts of your brain. If something feels off, trust that part of your brain. It's like 1,000,000 years old. It knows what it's doing. It's been around it's kept creatures safe for a very long time. So that fight or flight is probably the most accurate sense. And then, further up with different emotions and stuff, they really are a huge way that we navigate our environment, and something that's worth paying attention to and interpreting. It's a big way that we interpret incoming stimulus. So okay. Yeah, that's a good one, Chris. There's so many Bible verses out there that when you think about it in terms of, I think, trauma and struggle and kind of what we know now, they just are so much more profound than we ever kind of gave them credit for being. The verse that he gives is Proverbs 4:33. It says, "Guard your heart above all else, for everything you do flows from it." I like that. Yeah. Okay. So let me scroll down here. Oh, well, thank you, Malta, for the live stream donation. It says, "Thank you for tonight's session, Dana. I feel grateful to be here with all of you and to be directed to the truth." That's awesome. Well, you are so welcome. And I'm glad that anything that I have to say is helpful in any way, shape, or form. I spent so many years trying to figure this stuff out, and I don't by any stretch have it all figured out, but I feel like I've gotten a lot of the big pieces. And hopefully if we share some of the big pieces, then I hope that what I've learned helps the next person I hope it shaves off years off of your learning curve. And that's really what I try to do here, because I just feel like it shouldn't have to be this difficult to navigate all of this. So, and thank you guys for being here and for everything that goes on in the chat. I only catch parts of it, but it's so helpful. And the fact that you guys are here and that you're able to validate each other and help to answer questions and just give feedback and all of that is powerful stuff. So it's much appreciated by me, and I'm sure by lots of other people in the chat. So, well, thank you. Missouri Cowboy says, "I am thankful for all of you, and Dana too." Thank you for the live stream donation and the really nice comment. I appreciate it. Yes. And then up here is Narc is talking about the instincts and says, "Animals go on high alert before a storm. We could learn from them." Yeah. It's when you start viewing your intuition as instinct, and that it's there to protect you, and that it's not something that just women have. It's not something that's foo-foo. It's a legit thing, and it's important that we tune into it. Everything's going to start to just change for the better. Powerful. Oh, very cool. Frankie says, this place feels like home. Well, I hope that's a good thing. Fallon, we'll talk about that, and then we'll start. And I think we're probably going to be over on time. So actually, let's talk about that a little bit tomorrow. We're going to have book club tomorrow night, and 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The book we're going to be discussing is called The Intimacy Factor by Pia Melody. She's fantastic. If you are looking for other videos on YouTube to watch, I highly recommend her. She's been doing this for a very long time now. She's just a really cool lady, and boy, does she know her stuff. So highly recommend her videos. And like I said, we'll be discussing the book tomorrow. And we'll cover, Fallon, if you're going to be here tomorrow, let's cover that. The question has to do with dating after narcissistic abuse and how it still seems awkward and kind of what to do with that. So I think that's a great question. It's something that most people struggle with. I get it. I struggled with it too. So yeah, let's cover that more in depth tomorrow if you're going to be here. And if you're not going to be here, then we'll cover it again next week. So, okay. So with that said, oh, Doug, oh my goodness. I have been thinking about you so much over the past couple of weeks. I haven't seen you. Doug says, hi, Dana. Thanks for all you do. I know you were busy, but I started 2 new, I'm guessing YouTube channels, and I'm testing my metal and wondering if you could give me your thoughts about it. I don't know if you want me to say the name on here, but I'd be more than happy to check them out, Doug. Let me write them down. And he says, love and light to all, namaste. Deleting after. Okay. I won't say it out loud if you don't want me to. And thank you for the live stream donation. And it's good to see you around. I send lots of light and love your way on a fairly regular basis, just so you know. So I do. I think about you. And I hope that you're doing okay. Okay, I wrote down one of the names. He says, I will leave you the name in the comment of this. Okay, if you're okay with other people checking it out, you can leave it in the comment section, and then we can have other people check it out too. But if you don't want to, that's fine too. Okay, so with that said, let's take some time and just get grounded within ourselves. So if you are lying down, or if you can lie down, now would be a good time to find a comfortable spot. Or if you're sitting in a chair, taking some time to just breathe and get centered within yourself here. And if you are driving, you might decide that you want to pull over for like the next 10 or 15 minutes. Just so you can be fully in the moment. Let's take some deep breaths in through your nose and out. Exhale out through your mouth. Allowing each breath to go deeper and deeper down into the base of your lungs, down past your lungs into your stomach. Down into your hips, into your legs, allowing that oxygen to move slowly and deeply and effortlessly throughout your body. Healing and restoring every single cell that it touches. Being here fully in the moment. Turning your attention inward now and focusing on your heartbeat. Being here, being grounded within your body. Knowing that right now you are safe, you are okay, that there is so much right with you, and that you have come such a long way. Noticing as you tune into your body, just acknowledging the different sensations that you have. Perhaps some areas that tend to store stress, and some areas that seem to just effortlessly relax. Now let's bring our attention to the top of your head, working our way slowly down, relaxing every single muscle group, to relaxing your forehead, relaxing your eyes, noticing if you store stress or tension in any of those areas, relaxing your cheeks, relaxing your jaw, allowing it to fall open as your tongue detaches from the roof of your mouth. Feeling what it feels like when your face is completely relaxed. Relaxing your neck, your shoulders, your arms, letting your arms fall into whatever position is the most comfortable. Relaxing your hands and letting them fall into whatever position is the most comfortable. Feeling the heaviness of your arms. And if you notice any stress start to return in any areas that you've previously released that stress from, each breath you take in Send that healing breath to that area and visualize that breath just instantly and effortlessly releasing all tension in that spot. Now relaxing your chest, potentially rolling your shoulders back, allowing your chest to open, realizing that it's okay, that you are safe. Relaxing your stomach, relaxing your hips, letting your legs fall into whatever position is the most comfortable. Letting them grow heavy as you release all of the stress and tension out of your muscles. Relaxing your feet and allowing them to fall in whatever position is the most comfortable. Now let's do 7 breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. Just focusing on your heartbeat as you do this. Now acknowledging just how far you've come. You've done so much. You've made it through so much. You are such a warrior. You are stronger than you ever realized possible. And that there is so much that is right with you. There really is. And that you matter. You are worthy of being treated with dignity and respect. And that you are aware of that now. That your wants and your needs and your feelings and your thoughts and your opinions, all of these things matter. They make you who you are. Just acknowledging your authentic self and all of the different ways that it signals to you throughout the day. Knowing that you realize when something is toxic for you and when something is nourishing for you. And it's okay to spend more time around the things that nourish you. That your safety and your sanity matter. You matter. Now let's take the next 7 breaths. Kind of just send some good energy out into the world. Allowing our hearts to soften and to connect to everything that is good and right out in the world. And you might do this in a wide variety of ways. You might take this time to just let other people in the chat know how much you appreciate them, or perhaps the nourishing people or situations or things in your life. Or you might take some time for gratitude for the little things that you appreciate so much. Could be a hot shower, could be a bed to sleep in, could be a beautiful summer day. So let's take some time now for the next 7 breaths. Just connect to all that is good and right in the world. And when you're ready, come on back and give yourself a really big, energetic hug, just acknowledging you've gone through so much and you are so strong and you are so much wiser than you ever thought possible, and that you matter. Giving yourself the love that you give to so many others. When you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. So thank you guys so much for joining me here tonight. It was great to see everybody as usual, and for the chat, it's just really cool to see that these conversations are happening with people from all over the world. So take care. And again, book club is tomorrow night. So I hope you can join us 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I will see you then. So have a fantastic rest of your night and rest of your week if you're not going to be in book club tomorrow. So we'll see you then. As always, lots of love to you guys. You are not alone. You are not crazy. And you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care. I'll see you soon. Bye.